Chapter 546 Even Dragons Have to Bow. Chapter 546 Even Dragons Have to Bow. Immediately after Shifeng finished speaking, silence overtook the venue. Every guild representative in the hall was stupefied. Black Flame has gone insane. They all stared at Shifeng with dropped jaws. Who was the Nine Dragons Emperor? He was the pavilion master of the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion. He stood at the very top of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. With a single word, he could easily bring an end to the existence of any second-rate guild in the virtual gaming world. Moreover, the Nine Dragons Emperor was famed for being vicious and merciless. There was once a vice leader of an ordinary first-rate guild who had competed against the Nine Dragons Emperor in an auction for an item. Enraged, Nine Dragons had sent a notice to the first-rate guild and demanded that the vice leader in question grovel and apologize to him, as well as return the item in question. Otherwise, he would take action against this first-rate guild. How could an ordinary first-rate guild possibly hope to contend with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion? Furthermore, the first-rate guild in question had many competitors. Nine Dragons had only needed to give the word, and many other first-rate guilds would have joined hands to take out the offending guild. Having no other option, the first-rate guild sent for the vice leader in question to apologize and offer the item. In the end, however, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion still annihilated the first-rate guild, forcing the guild to migrate to a different virtual reality game. Currently, although Shifeng had not outright stated that he refused to sell, the price he demanded was the same as slapping the Nine Dragons Emperor in the face. Although Nine Dragons was one of the two pavilion masters of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, he only possessed less than 10%. The majority of the pavilion's shares remained in the Great Pavilion Master's hands. Shifeng's demand of 60% of the pavilion's shares was no different than demanding ownership of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and a position above even his, the Nine Dragons Emperor's. This Black Flame is exactly as the rumors made him out to be. He is simply fearless. Galaxy Past could not help but voice his admiration. Throughout God's domain, other than those super guilds and a few guilds with extremely powerful corporations backing them, there were no guilds that dared provoke the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Even the upper echelons of super guilds would consider their options carefully before humiliating this pavilion master. Although a virtual reality game was only a game, where there were people, there was bound to be conflict. The Nine Dragons Emperor was the face of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Even if Shifeng refused to give in to Nine Dragons' coercion, he should have handled the situation with a more delicate hand. Yet, Shifeng had thrown all pretenses out the window and made a mockery of the Nine Dragons Emperor. Even if it were just for his reputation's sake, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion would now go all out to destroy him. Hence, Galaxy Past truly admired Shifeng's courage. He should have shown some restraint and refrained from such an impulsive comeback. If he could have endured the humiliation he has suffered today in order to retaliate another day, he would have gained more of my respect. However, with him acting like a boorish fellow, Zero Wing is truly finished this time, Purple Eye said as she glanced at Shifeng. She then turned to look at Aqua Rose, silently lamenting as she said, "It seems that Aqua Rose has still made the wrong decision. In the end, a small guild will only ever be a small guild. Though it might triumph temporarily, it could not make it last." Meanwhile, in the second-floor reception room. "Your guild leader has gone insane. That's the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Moreover, that's the Nine Dragons Emperor he is provoking. Just what is going through your guild leader's head? Even if Nine Dragons doesn't take offense, if word spreads, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion will definitely try to annihilate Zero Wing with everything it has to restore its reputation," Gentle Snow exclaimed as she stared at Melancholic Smile. Based on what she understood of Shifeng, the man was not ignorant. On the contrary, he was quite shrewd with great foresight. Yet, now, he had actually offended the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. She had no idea why Shifeng had done such a thing. Even I don't know what he is trying to do. Melancholic Smile shook her head. She then said, however, after hearing the guild leader's words, "I can't help but feel proud. Why are they allowed to bully us, while we are not allowed to resist?" Gentle Snow failed to think of a response. Although he was not in the wrong, there was a price to pay for those words. Similarly, the precondition for resisting was to have sufficient strength. Although Zero Wing was relatively powerful, it was still far from a titanic existence like the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Challenging the pavilion at his point was simply suicide. Meanwhile, back in the first-floor reception hall, even the Nine Dragons Emperor himself was stunned. He had never expected Shifeng to be so foolish. Even the heavens would laugh at such folly. However, Nine Dragons could not find it in himself to laugh. Instead, his expression shifted slightly as a cold, killing intent flashed in his eyes. However, this killing intent quickly disappeared. In the next moment, a bright, dazzling smile appeared on the Nine Dragons Emperor's face. Since Guild Leader Black Flame has no intentions of selling, I won't overstay my welcome. Goodbye. The Nine Dragons Emperor smiled. He then left the reception hall with his subordinates. Everyone else in the reception hall turned to look at each other. What had just happened? That's it. Wasn't he supposed to warn Zero Wing and teach them a lesson? Purple, let's leave as well, then. At this moment, Galaxy Past smiled faintly as he prepared to leave the building. Guild leader, are we not going to negotiate with Zero Wing? Are we just leaving? Purple, I asked curiously. It had taken quite some effort to embark on this trip. After all, Galaxy Past was the guild leader of the Star Alliance. If he left White River City without obtaining even the tiniest harvest, he would become a laughingstock. It will be meaningless. If even the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion has been treated in such a way, do you think Black Flame will agree to sell the Candlelight Trading Firm to us? Galaxy Past shook his head. He then explained, also, a war is going to begin in White River City, so don't you think we should return quickly? War. Purple, I suddenly came to a realization. Although Nine Dragons Emperor had left the building peacefully and had not made any vicious remarks, in reality, killing intent filled his heart. It would have been foolish of him to reveal his thoughts inside the Candlelight Trading Firm. Inside this shop, Black Flame's words were law. Anyone who dared spout profanities inside the building would only be sentenced to death. Only a brain-dead fool would risk that just to sate his pride. Most likely, the Nine Dragons Emperor would notify his subordinates, instructing them to annihilate Zero Wing the moment he returned to the Black Dragon Empire. He would not give Black Flame the chance to react. Ha ha ha. Black Flame, so even you will have such a day. Feng Shenyang grinned like a drunk fool. At this point, there was no doubt that the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion would obliterate Zero Wing. However, based on the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's prestige, it would abhor remaining in a small location like White River City. Once Zero Wing was annihilated, Overwhelming Smile would automatically become the #1 guild of White River City without even needing him to expend any effort. Afterward, the various guild representatives promptly left the Candlelight Trading Firm. Not a single guild chose to stay behind. At this moment, Aqua Rose turned to Shifeng, wearing a grim expression as she said, Guild leader, now that you have provoked the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, the pavilion will not let us off the hook. The pavilion's background is also not something first-rate guilds like the Star Alliance and Ouroboros could hope to compare with. They have countless experts in their midst. They also have plenty of great experts who are famous in the virtual gaming world. If they dispatch a large number of experts to ambush our guildmates, the resulting death count will far surpass that of our war with Overwhelming Smile. Even Underworld was already capable of dispatching over 200 battle-experienced experts, not to mention the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. The pavilion most likely had plenty of top-tier experts as well. It was simply not an existence that Zero Wing could contend with. Within the region of White River City, even a dragon has to bow before Zero Wing. You should prepare. There will be fun to be had soon, Shifeng laughed. He then left the first-floor reception hall and headed to the VIP room on the second floor. Naturally, Shifeng had his own reasons for slapping the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's face. The first reason, it had felt awesome. He was an expert who had set foot into the flowing water realm. He was even geared with a complete Tier 1 set equipment and fragmented legendary and epic ranked rings. He even wielded a magic weapon. So, how could he possibly concede to a pavilion master of a super first-rate guild? In the past, even a real super guild had to cower in fear when facing the Midnight Tea Party, a 20-man independent team. Currently, He was in possession of weapons and equipment that were far superior to anyone else's. He also had several large-scale destruction spells. Not to mention, White River City was his home ground. Why wouldn't he challenge a super first-rate guild? As for the second reason, it was to forge the guild. If one wanted to improve on their skills, they only needed to do one thing: fight. Experts were not nurtured through dungeon raids, but through live battles against other players. Overwhelming Smile was no longer a challenge, so they had to choose a stronger opponent to pit themselves against. In any case, Zero Wing did not lack money. They could afford to fight the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Chapter 547, Shocking God's Domain. Chapter 547, Shocking God's Domain. Underscore. Aqua Rose revealed a bitter smile as she watched Shifeng's departing figure. However, when she considered the situation from a different perspective, Shifeng's decision was not necessarily a bad thing. In the past, other than super guilds, there really weren't any guilds that had dared provoke the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Now that Zero Wing had made a fuss, even if they were defeated, it would be a glorious defeat. Moreover, suffering defeat in God's domain did not equal annihilation. God's domain was not as simple as other virtual reality games. Thoroughly annihilating a guild was easier said than done. It was similar to Zero Wing's efforts to chase Overwhelming Smile out of White River City. Despite having massacred Overwhelming Smile's members, not only did the guild still reside in White River City, but it was also getting by quite well. Only, the guild was forced to maintain a low profile, and its development had slowed significantly. Although the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had a lot of experts, and its financial prowess was enormous, it would not be able to extinguish Zero Wing in White River City easily. Not to mention, Zero Wing also had the Candlelight trading firm supplying it with coins. Alright, let's head back and prepare. White River City won't be so peaceful from now on. Saying so, Aqua Rose left the Candlelight trading firm with Zero Wing's core members. Meanwhile, inside the VIP room on the second floor, Shifeng had already begun to discuss business with Gentle Snow. Guild leader Black Flame, this move of yours is truly incomprehensible, Gentle Snow said, confusion plastered on her snow-white face. She could not help but ask, Guild leader Black Flame, you should know that there are a total of 7 first-rate guilds competing over the Black Dragon Empire. Although 2 of them are not based in the Empire, they have invested a significant sum into the branch's development. Yet, despite there being so many first-rate guilds in the Empire, only the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion has a branch guild set up in the Imperial capital. None of the other first-rate guilds have set up their branch guilds there yet. Do you know why? The Imperial capital isn't a nice place to live. Shifeng laughed. Gentle Snow rolled her eyes. He was clearly pretending to be stupid. Helpless, she explained, that is because the branch leader there is Blood Dragon, one of 9 Dragon's Emperor's most formidable generals. Blood Dragon is a violent man, and he loves battles more than anything. He also has a group of experts under him called the Blood Legion. If any guilds refuse to submit to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and dare to reside in the Imperial capital, then this Blood Legion will come forward. The Blood Legion will secretly target these guilds, going as far as to ambush the upper echelons even while still within the city limits. None of these first-rate guilds wish to drop all pretense of cordiality with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and allow others to take advantage of the situation. Hence, they had no better option but to withdraw from the Imperial capital and develop in other cities. If the Pavilion sends the Blood Legion to White River City, it won't be a good thing for Zero Wing. Shifeng simply revealed a faint smile in response to Gentle Snow's words. Naturally, he knew all of this information. Moreover, his understanding of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was even more thorough than Gentle Snow's. The Blood Legion's fame was not one bit exaggerated. The Blood Legion was also known as the Assassination Legion, comprised of a group of assassins that the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion had carefully nurtured. Anyone who opposed the Heavenly Dragon Legion would oftentimes find themselves killed back to level 0 the following day. The result would not change even if one hid inside a city. It was not an easy feat to kill players inside a city. It was especially so for a major city. Even if one managed to kill a player, the city guards would still kill them and deliver a severe punishment. In mild cases, This punishment would be a jail sentence of several days. In severe cases, it was highly possible that the guards would first execute the player multiple times, then jail them for a dozen days or so, and finally, chase them out of an bar entry to the city. If this player dared show their face in the city, the guards would execute them on the spot. Unless that player did not mind losing a few levels and being locked up for a few weeks, or they no longer wished to reside in the city any longer, they normally would not take action inside an NPC city. During the initial stages of God's domain, the various large guilds already wished they could split in two to hasten their development. One could just imagine how much of a loss it would be for a guild to have its experts locked up for days or weeks. Every guild treated its experts like treasures. Losing an expert for a single day could cause immense damage to a guild, not to mention a jail sentence of a few days. However, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion paid these consequences no mind. They had plenty of experts to go around. This was the pavilion's strength. Forget it. I've already told you about the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Since you made me wait so long, may I know how many intermediate mana armor kits guild leader Black Flame intends to sell to me? Shifeng's unperturbed attitude left Gentle Snow utterly speechless. At this moment, however, her own situation did not look too well, either, so she could not be of any help even if she wanted to. Miss Snow, how many do you want? Shifeng simply laughed off Gentle Snow's worries, not bothering to offer her any explanation. However, he knew that Gentle Snow sincerely wanted to help him. He also understood that she was currently powerless to help him. Hearing Shifeng's question, Gentle Snow pondered for a moment before asking softly, "Do you have enough to gear a 50-man team?" Everybody knew how precious the intermediate mana armor kits were. Even partnered guilds were only allowed to purchase 21 kits at a time. That amount was only sufficient to gear 9 players at most. Beyond that, it was extremely difficult to obtain any more kits, as all those who had managed to purchase them refused to part with them. It was impossible for any guild, other than Zero Wing, to obtain a sufficient number of intermediate mana armor kits to gear a 50-man team fully. Okay, but the Candlelight Trading Firm requires a large amount of rare materials. In the future, I will require Ouroboros to sell the majority of the materials it obtains to the Candlelight Trading Firm, Shifeng said. Currently, Zero Wing was still capable of meeting the Candlelight Trading Firm's demand. However, as the firm developed, the materials it required would increase. At that time, Zero Wing alone would not be enough to satisfy the demand of the Candlelight Trading Firm. However, if a first-rate guild like Ouroboros supplied the firm, there would no longer be any problems. Once I return, I'll instruct my subordinates to send you the materials. Gentle Snow nodded in agreement. In any case, she was tight on money right now. If she could convert some of the guild's materials into coins, it would help her greatly. After Shifeng and Gentle Snow concluded their trade, the matter of Zero Wing's guild leader, Black Flame, provoking the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had already spread throughout God's domain. As a super first-rate guild, any minor matter relating to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion would receive the attention of the various large guilds in the virtual gaming world, not to mention a major incident such as a guild openly insulting them. For a time, everyone began to pay attention to the Star Moon Kingdom, to Zero Wing, and to Black Flame. Crap, Black Flame must have gone insane. He actually dared to slap the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion in the face. Does he not want to play God's domain anymore? What do you know? Black Flame is super amazing. He is a titled expert on the God's domain ranking list. He has his own pride, naturally, so how could he possibly hand over the Candlelight Trading Firm he had built by himself? I wonder what the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion will do. Isn't it obvious? If Dragon Phoenix Pavilion does not flatten a guild like Zero Wing, will it still qualify to be called a super first-rate guild? News and talk of the conflict between the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and Zero Wing filled God's domain's forums. As for super guilds, they, too, had fun watching from the sidelines. Currently, while all of God's domain was in an uproar, the atmosphere inside one of White River City's high-class restaurants was extremely awkward. Pavilion Master, leave this matter to this subordinate. I will give Black Flame more than what he bargained for, the robust blood dragon requested respectfully. I never expected to encounter such a blind fool in this far-off city. Now, every player in God's domain knows of this incident. The Great Pavilion Master has even sent me a message personally, telling me to deal with this matter as visibly as possible and show those super guilds that the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion is no longer just a super first-rate guild. Rather, it is a super guild that stands on equal footing, Nine Dragons Emperor said, a bone-chilling glint flashing in his eyes. Curling up his lips, he said, since the Great Pavilion Master has issued the command, we cannot take this matter lightly. Notify the War Dragon Legion and have them meet us here immediately. I want to destroy Zero Wings Guild residents personally. Chapter 548, War Dragon Legion. Chapter 548, War Dragon Legion. The War Dragon Legion? Blood Dragon could not help but suck in a breath of cold air when he heard this name. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was divided into two pavilions, the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion and the Phoenix Pavilion. Both pavilions had their own strongest legions. The Heavenly Dragon Pavilion's strongest force was the War Dragon Legion. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion nurtured its own experts internally. Among these experts, only the best of the best were allowed into the War Dragon Legion. One could say that the War Dragon Legion was the strongest legion specially established to contend with super guilds. Blood Dragon had also come from the War Dragon Legion. Who wouldn't be shocked by the Nine Dragons Emperor summoning the War Dragon Legion? Pavilion Master, aren't we just dealing with a small guild? Is there really a need for such a commotion? Chaos Dancer, the beautiful woman seated beside Nine Dragons Emperor, advised, in fact, we can rely on the Blood Legion to get rid of Zero Wing. If we expose the strength of the War Dragon Legion right now, won't we waste a trump card that we could use against those super guilds in the future? It doesn't matter. Since joining God's domain, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion has yet to achieve anything significant. Now that everyone is watching the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, it is a good opportunity for an excellent performance, Nine Dragons Emperor said, smiling playfully. Moreover, Zero Wing's reputation is not insignificant. If we can finish off Zero Wing swiftly, it will serve as a shock to some of those weaklings and let everyone know that the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion is no longer a super first-rate guild, but a true super guild. Understood. This subordinate will notify the War Dragon Legion immediately. Chaos Dance then began contacting the War Dragon Legion. Time passed little by little. While the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion prepared to deal with Zero Wing, other guilds did not idle and do nothing. Every one of them gathered their members in White River City. For a time, experts swarmed White River City. Despite it obviously being daytime, the number of players filling the streets surpassed even nighttime. Among all these players, aside from those that large guilds had sent, there were plenty of ordinary players who had hurried over from other cities. Players throughout God's domain knew about the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's intentions to take out Zero Wing. Although this was clearly a one-sided battle, many players still wanted to witness the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's strength. Hence, many ordinary players had hurried to White River City to watch the show. However, it was also this reason that boosted the candlelight trading firm's business. Among the items sold by the firm, light stones were the most popular. The candlelight trading firm's income had practically recovered to its peak, earning nearly 1,000 gold in 1 hour. As a result, Melancholic Smile and the others at the candlelight trading firm focused fully on their work. Old 5, I heard that Black Flame defeated you and Old 6 even after you two cooperated. This incident has not impressed the higher-ups, and they've started to look down on our 7 ghosts. When the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion deals with Zero Wing, we need to deal with this matter properly, a thin, middle-aged man with bronze skin said seriously. Brother 3, rest assured, I will not damage our reputation, 5th ghost said, killing intent flashing in his eyes. Previously, even though he had worked with 6th ghost, Black Flame still defeated them. Moreover, they had even lost all of their equipment upon dying and had been barred from entering the game for 2 whole days. By now, they had both become laughingstocks in Underworld. This time, in order to restore the 7 ghosts' reputation, they needed to avenge themselves properly and complete the tasks the higher-ups had given them. All is well as long as you know it. Our task is very simple this time. Assist young Master Feng in obtaining 300 intermediate mana armor kits. It will be even better if we can obtain even more equipment and kits. However, Since the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion is spearheading this matter, it is best if we keep a low profile. So, first, let's focus on getting the 300 intermediate mana armor kits, the Thin Man, third ghost, said. This time, to ensure we complete our task, I have even called Old 4 and Old 7 to help us. With the 5 of us, we should be able to take down Black Flame easily. The only thing we have to worry about is the pavilion itself. It is best if we form a proper plan. On this point, Brother Third Ghost, please rest assured. Based on my investigations, the Blood Dragon's subordinates, the Blood Legion, will not be involved this time. The Nine Dragons Emperor has called in the War Dragon Legion instead. Every member of the War Dragon Legion is proud and arrogant, and they usually look down on everyone else. They should not pay any attention to us should we move against Zero Wing, Feng Shenyang explained, smiling faintly. As insurance, I have even had a large group of elites come over from Maple City. With such a powerful force, Black Flame will have no hope of survival. Having the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion deal with Zero Wing is already overkill. Adding us into the mix, Black Flame will die with a 100% certainty. Even if he is even more powerful than we suspect, he will have to consider his options carefully. At that time, he will willingly hand over the 300 intermediate mana armor kits. Fifth Ghost laughed coldly. If he refuses, then I'll give him a taste of what it feels like to wish for death. All of White River City's various large guilds, including Overwhelming Smile, considered and prepared to strike against Zero Wing while it was down, taking the opportunity to benefit from the guild's downfall. Meanwhile, in a high-class bar a short distance from Zero Wing's guild residence, many upper managers of guilds had gathered. The entire 3-story building was packed full of players. Among them, first-rate guilds fully occupied all of the private rooms on the 3rd floor. From these rooms, one could clearly see every movement around Zero Wing's guild residence. Guild leader, don't you think that Zero Wing is acting strangely? Even now, they are still so carefree. They have not taken any precautionary measures at all. Is this Black Flame pretending to be a fool, or is he actually one? Purple Eye frowned as she watched Zero Wing's guild residence through the window. There's nothing surprising about this. Black Flame simply does not understand the Nine Dragons Emperor's character. Look at the people inside the bar, for example. Aren't most of them members of first-rate guilds? Meanwhile, a newly established guild like Zero Wing and a newcomer to the virtual gaming world like Black Flame don't know Nine Dragons' style of conduct. Thus, he continues with his carefree manner, Galaxy Past said, laughing. Downing a mouthful of flame beer, he continued, the Nine Dragons Emperor is someone who conducts himself with a lofty tone and does not play his cards according to common sense. This time, he has even secretly mobilized the War Dragon Legion to deal with Zero Wing, making a fuss over a minor incident. Naturally, the only reason why he would mobilize such a powerful legion is to destroy Zero Wing's guild residence. A guild residence is different from a private shop. While inside the shop, the manager is invincible. However, it is a different story for a guild residence. It is slightly troublesome to deal with the residence's hired guards, and there are also the city guards who patrol the streets. With current players' levels and equipment, it is still impossible to resist the patrolling guards. Hence, no sane guild would attempt to attack another guild's residence. However, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion is no trivial existence. One cannot measure by the strength of an ordinary guild. Moreover, the Nine Dragons Emperor is no fool. I keep getting the feeling that he has some sort of trick up his sleeve. Otherwise, he would not have sent the War Dragon Legion, a trump card that he had prepared for facing Super Guild. What we need to do now is wait for the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion to make its move. Once they take action and Zero Wing falls, we can begin our operation as well. Purple Eye nodded silently. This time, the Star Alliance had sent quite a number of elites and experts. They were not afraid that Zero Wing would not fall today. Instead, it was only a matter of how much profit they could gain. However, the various large guilds, including the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, was ignorant of one point. Shifeng was a reincarnator. Moreover, he had also been the guild leader of a second-rate guild in the past. In order to survive in God's domain's harsh conditions, he had endured relentless pain and suffering. as far as understanding massive existences like the Nine Dragons Emperor. The Nine Dragons Emperor, most likely, did not have a better understanding than Shifeng. Chapter 549 Leave None Alive. Chapter 549 Leave None Alive. Inside the meeting room in Zero Wing's guild residence. Zero Wing's core members filled the large meeting room. Everyone could feel the tension in the air. War was imminent. Although Zero Wing had succeeded in suppressing overwhelming smile in White River City, their current enemy, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, was a lot stronger than overwhelming smile. The two guilds were on entirely different levels. Every player present fully understood how severe of a situation they were in. They also knew that it was highly unlikely that they would overcome this hurdle. Seated on the guild leader's throne, Shifeng suddenly asked, "You must think that I am a fool, right?" However, the only answer he received was silence. Not a single person answered his question. Everyone only stared at their guild leader, who was shrouded in mystery, quietly. "I know the answer even without you saying a word," Shifeng laughed. Casual and relaxed, he said, "Everyone must think that I have gone insane, that I overestimate myself by challenging a super first-rate guild like the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Until now, aside from super guilds, not a single guild dares to make an enemy of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Do you know why? The reason is very simple. They are simply too strong. They are strong enough that other guilds despair at the thought of them as an enemy. I believe that you should know all that. At this time, many guilds have already begun to prepare to take advantage of our misfortune. Every one of them is closely eyeing us like prey. There is not a single guild out there that thinks we might come out of this on top. They all believe that we will lose without a doubt and that our names will soon be wiped from God's domain. Do you know why? I'll tell you why. Since the very beginning, whether it is the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion or the various other first-rate guilds, none of these people have seen us as equals. Since the very beginning, they have thought of us as weak. So, they have come to bully us, to drink our blood and eat our flesh, to destroy us. However, I will warn them now. They will be disappointed. Since there has never been a guild courageous enough to challenge the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, then, today, we will be the first to make history. We will show everyone that Zero Wing is not a guild they can afford to provoke. If they wish to plunder our corpses, they'll have to seek permission from the swords in our hands first. The battle is to the strong. Today, let us teach the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion a lesson. The moment Shifeng finished his speech, everyone suddenly felt their blood boil. None of them had ever thought that such a day would come. Throughout the virtual gaming world, other than super guilds, there had never been a guild daring enough to provoke and challenge the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. However, Zero Wing dared. Moreover, Zero Wing's guild leader himself led this challenge. Isn't it just a super first-rate guild? I've long since grown tired of looking at their faces. Today, I'll use them to release some stress. Cola laughed excitedly. Ha ha ha. Guild leader, I've been waiting for you to say that. I'm bored of battling overwhelming smile constantly. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion has arrived at just the right time. It just so happens that I can use them to test my recent improvement. Blackie licked his lips, revealing an eager grin. Guild leader, tell us how we should deal with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. I want to be the first one to have a go at them, Flying Shadow said excitedly. This is seriously insane. Aqua Rose shook her head helplessly. In the next moment, however, she smiled and said, "But I like it." For a time, every Zero Wing member the meeting room talked and laughed with each other, the heavy atmosphere from before vanishing. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was indeed strong. However, they were not a bunch of weak and powerless noobs, either. Since the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion dared to oppress them using force, they would show the pavilion that it had chosen a wrong opponent. They would let the pavilion know that the opponent it was about to face was not a weak, little cub, but rather, it was a ferocious beast with sharp fangs and claws. If I am not mistaken, it is highly possible that the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion will strike once the sun sets. Fire dance, how are the preparations going on your side? Shifeng asked as he turned to the sharp and mesmerizing fire dance. Based on Shifeng's understanding of Nine Dragons Emperor, there was an 80% chance that he intended to destroy Zero Wing's guild residence. If a guild residence were destroyed, it could not be repaired within 10 days' time. Moreover, if a guild residence were destroyed, all members of the corresponding guild within the city would receive a penalty. Not only would all members lose a level, but their EXP gain would also be halved for the following 10 days. The guild's popularity would drop by 50,000 points as well. Moreover, after the destroyed guild residence was reconstructed, the quality of the guild quests the guild would receive would be significantly affected. The best time to destroy a guild residence was at night. Players' greatest foe when trying to destroy an enemy guild residence was not other players, but the patrolling NPC city guards. These city guards were no trivial matter, they were all level 150 NPCs. To players, they were nightmares. These NPCs only needed one hit to finish off the current players of God's domain. However, the number of patrolling city guards would change depending on the time of day. During the day, these NPCs always patrolled in groups of 20. By the time night arrived, however, that number would decrease to 10. If a guild attacked an enemy guild residence at night, it could notably lessen its losses. That way, the guild would have more combat power to spare for destroying the enemy guild residence. Meanwhile, since Shifeng dared to provoke the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, he had naturally prepared. If one wished to destroy a guild residence, aside from the city guards, there were also the hired guards inside the guild residence to contend with. Although the hired guards were not as powerful as the level 150 city guards, they were still genuine level 50 NPCs. Meanwhile, depending on the employed NPC's strength, the asking price of said NPC would vary. Tier 0 guards cost 5 silver per day, whereas Tier 1 guards cost 30 silver per day. When hiring these guards, one had to prepay 10 days of their services. Shifeng was a viscount, and all this time, he had been hiring a mix of 50 Tier 1 and Tier 0 guards to defend Zero Wings Guild residence. However, seeing as the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion led this assault, he had not hesitated to replace all of his guards with Tier 1 NPCs. In any case, what he had was money. In addition, since early on, Shifeng had told everyone in the guild to focus on raising their reputation. Hence, at this moment in time, there were also many people within the guild who had high reputation. For example, Fire Dance, Aqua Rose, Blackie, and several other core members of Zero Wing did not lack reputation points. Although they had yet to become viscounts like Shifeng, they were barons, and every one of them was capable of hiring 10 level 50 Tier 1 NPCs. In total, they had over 200 Tier 1 NPCs employed right now. This was a very powerful force. It's done. They all are hiding and lying in wait. Fire Dance nodded, a playful smile appearing on her face. Time slowly ticked by. While everyone waited for the start of the battle, night arrived in God's domain. Currently, players clogged the streets neighboring Zero Wings Guild residence. Pavilion Master, all 1,000 men from the War Dragon Legion are in position, a valiant and extraordinary-looking youth reported to Nine Dragons Emperor. The War Dragon Legion was the strongest force in the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion's arsenal. As of today, it had never been used to deal with any guild less than a super guild. The Legion consisted of 1,000 players, and every one of these players wore level 25 fine gold equipment. A few even had level 25 dark gold equipment. These Legionnaires' levels also ranged from level 27 to level 28. These players were definitely at the peak of God's domain in terms of levels. Every member also radiated a sharp and penetrating aura. Although the War Dragon Legion consisted of 1,000 members, they felt like an army of tens of thousands that was capable of mass destruction. Meanwhile, among these players, the man reporting to Nine Dragons Emperor was even more extraordinary. He was the War Dragon Legion's commander, Martial Dragon. He was a level 28 berserker, and the majority of his equipment consisted of level 25 dark gold equipment. The great sword he wielded was also of indiscernible quality. However, judging by the blade's capability of even tearing apart air, one could tell that it was an exceptional item with a single glance. Aside from the War Dragon Legion's 1,000 players, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had also dispatched close to 10,000 elite players. These elite players were all level 25 and above. It was a truly shocking sight. Only a first-rate guild would be capable of dispatching so many elite players. Were it not for the transportation fees, this number would have most likely been several times higher. Many players involuntarily trembled when they saw the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's war formation from afar. This was the power of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Regarding both financial prowess and manpower, ordinary first-rate guilds simply could not compare to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Ha ha ha. Zero Wing is truly finished this time. Sitting in a third-floor private room of a high-class bar, Feng Xianyang felt indescribable joy well up in his heart when he saw the pavilion's army. It's as expected of Martial Dragon, the commander of the War Dragon Legion. I can feel that terrifying aura of his even from such a distance. Fear filled Fifth Ghost's heart when he looked at the valiant Martial Dragon. Martial Dragon is a true mutant. He is not human at all. Even our boss has said so. Otherwise, he would not be capable of becoming the War Dragon Legion's commander. If we encounter him, it is best that we avoid provoking him, Third Ghost reminded his brothers in arms. Meanwhile, standing on the street, Nine Dragons Emperor swept a glance over the army before him. In the next moment, he waved his hand and pointed at Zero Wing's guild residence. Very calmly, he said, "Go. Leave none alive." Chapter 550 Exceeding Expectations. Chapter 550 Exceeding Expectations. Under Nine Dragons Emperor's command, the members of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion charged towards Zero Wing's guild residence. The pavilion's army's attack was organized. A majority of the pavilion's elite players were positioned in the front of the army, whereas the War Dragon Legion occupied the middle, and the remaining elite players took up the rear. These players were further separated into groups. However, unlike guild wars that usually involved thousands of players, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had grouped its members into parties of 6. Each party consisted of MTS, healers, and ranged and melee damage dealers, the standard compositions of a dungeon party. Although this militaristic configuration was not suited for a large battlefield, it was perfect for battles in narrow terrains such as a city. The army could react to all sorts of problems in a timely manner. It has finally begun. Purple, did you order those assassins under you to record this battle? Galaxy Past, who sat comfortably in a third-floor private room of the high-class bar, asked. Smiling, he stated, "This is a good opportunity to collect data on the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, particularly the experts from the War Dragon Legion. Every member of the Legion is worth noting. It might come in handy in the future." This high-class bar offered an excellent vantage point. He could see practically everything that occurred around Zero Wing's residence. However, Galaxy Past was still not satisfied with this. He had positioned assassins under his command in several other buildings in order to record the battle from the closest distance possible. Just how strong was the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion? Particularly, how was the pavilion's strength after joining God's domain? Other than a few upper managers of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, nobody knew the answer to these questions. Now that the pavilion launched an assault on Zero Wing's residence, it was clear to see that their strength was nothing to scoff at. Otherwise, every large guild would have already attacked guild residences that they found to be an eyesore instead of letting those guilds with little strength live this long. Just the patrolling guards were enough trouble. The hired guards were no trivial matter either. They all were level 50 NPCs. To current players, these level 50 NPCs were still too powerful to handle. However, the truly troublesome issue was the players of the guild itself. Zero Wing had definitely taken some precautionary measures. It was normal for around 20 to 30,000 players to defend the guild residence at all times. Even if the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had deployed the War Dragon Legion, Zero Wing's guild residence would not be so easily destroyed. The pavilion would have to reveal some of its true capabilities, and this was precisely what Galaxy Past, and all of the other large guilds watching, wanted to witness. As God's domain was still in its early stages, there had yet to be any major conflicts between the various first-rate guilds, super guilds, and the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. However, that would not necessarily remain the case in the future. It was better to prepare ahead of time. Hence, the Star Alliance wasn't the only guild to send a large group of assassins to record the battle. Many other guilds had also dispatched their assassins, all of them hoping to uncover even the smallest detail about the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's background. Meanwhile, inside Zero Wing's residence, the guild's members had long since prepared for the upcoming war. Every one of them stood, waiting, inside the guild residence. Guild leader, they've arrived. Initial estimates put their number somewhere over 10,000, with the weakest among them being elite players. Their equipment is also a match for our elite members, Aqua Rose reported. Everyone's heart skipped a beat upon hearing Aqua Rose's report. Although Zero Wing had 50,000 members, they only had around 14,500 elites. Yet, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had casually mustered a force of 10,000 elite players. This was simply too frightening. Sure enough, the pavilion is both rich and powerful, Shifeng laughed. This situation did not surprise him. After all, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was a super first-rate guild. Even though White River City was not the pavilion's home ground, it would still be child's play for it to obliterate a second-rate guild. Move out, then. Coordinate your attacks with the NPC's core members. Your main goal is to fend off the pavilion's War Dragon Legion. As for the enemy elites, they are just cannon fodder. Don't worry about them. Yes, sir. Everyone from Zero Wing unsheathed their weapons as a single unit, preparing to meet the oncoming threat. This time, Shifeng did not bother to send for many members to defend the guild residence. The defending players consisted only of Zero Wing's elite and core members with a total just over 14,000 players. It was not because Shifeng did not want more people defending the residence. Only, having more people was not necessarily a good thing. A normal member of the guild would only find their death by joining this battle. Moreover, the battlefield was very cramped. There was simply no way to display the advantage of numbers here. On the contrary, having too many members in the battle would only obstruct the elite members. As the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's army was about to charge through the residence's entrance, the ranged classes of Zero Wing got ready to launch their spells and arrows. If an outsider barged into the residence without explicit permission, guild members were allowed to kill said outsider without needing to fear any repercussions. The city guards would not take action against the guild members. On the contrary, if an outsider attacked people inside the residence, the city guards would rush towards the residence to apprehend them. As elemental mana began to gather above Zero Wing's residence and patrolling city guards began to charge over, Nine Dragons Emperor suddenly shouted, "Activate the scrolls." Suddenly, several MTS at the forefront of the army revealed black magic scrolls that they had kept hidden for quite some time now. The MTS immediately unfurled the scrolls and activated them. In the next moment, the elemental mana filing the space above Zero Wing's residence started going berserk. Curse scroll? Shifeng was genuinely surprised when he saw the magic scrolls in his enemy's hands. Magic scrolls fit into various categories. However, the rarest had to be ones that carried curses. This was a type of forbidden spell. All curses possessed an astonishing might, and it was not easy to turn it into a magic scroll. Hence, it was extremely difficult to obtain even one curse scroll. Yet, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had actually managed to reveal 4 such scrolls. It was simply inconceivable. At this moment, however, even Nine Dragons Emperor's face twitched slightly. 4 curse scrolls. He had only managed to obtain these 4 scrolls after gathering the entirety of the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion's power. Now that he was using all of them in one go, and on a small, nameless guild no less, even he felt the sting of the loss. 4 curse scrolls. Consider this your burial, Zero Wing. Nine Dragons Emperor smiled faintly at the dark clouds gathering in the sky. Suddenly, black rain began to fall. As if these black raindrops had lives of their own, they attached themselves to all players caught within the spell's vicinity. Dark God's Descent. Shifeng paled instantly. Although he wanted to defend against this spell, Dark God's Descent was unblockable. Even if he had magic immunity, it wouldn't change a thing. Dark God's Descent was a silencing curse. With 4 of these curse scrolls being used simultaneously, the forbidden spell's effective radius and duration increased significantly. It was definitely an efficient weapon for team battles. At this moment, a Dark God status imperceptibly appeared in everyone's status window, the duration lasting for 1 full hour. In other words, within the next hour, Any players within the curse's effective radius were unable to use any of their spells. They could not even use the tools they had inside their bags. To put it simply, players could only participate in melee combat. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had obviously prepared these curses as a countermeasure for large-scale destruction spells and NPCs. Blood Dragon, lead some elites to pin down the patrolling guards and let Martial Dragon handle the rest, 9 Dragons Emperor ordered. He then turned to look at Chaos Dancer, saying, "Let's go, we'll watch the show from upstairs." After receiving the command, Blood Dragon led the elite players, who were positioned at the rear line and remained unaffected by the Dark God, and charged towards the 10-level 150 patrolling guards. At the same time, Martial Dragon shouted, "Kill, annihilate Zero Wing, leave not a single player alive." The War Dragon Legion suddenly charged into Zero Wing's residence. As for the other elite players, they were tasked to delay the residence's NPC guards. When silenced, an expert's strength stepped into the spotlight. When the War Dragon Legion's 1,000 members charged into Zero Wing's 10,000-plus elite members, they were like wolves among a flock of sheep. Immediately, the members of the War Dragon Legion started a slaughter. At this point, Zero Wing possessed more than 400 Tier 1 players. It had more Tier 1 players than every guild in White River City combined. Naturally, all those capable of becoming Tier 1 classes at this stage of the game employed powerful techniques. Even if they were not yet experts, they were not far from that hurdle. Zero Wing's members were also famed for having amazing equipment. Even if their techniques were lacking, they could make up the gap with their equipment. In front of absolute strength, all manner of tricks were useless. Even so, Zero Wing possessed far fewer experts than the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Not to mention, the members of the War Dragon Legion were experts who had undergone careful screening. "Do you think we're that easily bullied? All guards, to the lines," Shifeng commanded. Suddenly, an additional 200 Tier 1 NPCs emerged from the guild hall. Moreover, these Tier 1 NPCs were all melee classes. Chapter 551, Fleeting Scene. Chapter 551, Fleeting Scene. The originally imposing Dragon Phoenix Pavilion members were immediately shocked by the appearance of the 200-level 50 Tier 1 NPCs. 9 Dragons Emperor, who watched the battle from afar, also wore a grim expression. Didn't the reports say that they only had around 50-plus NPCs? 9 Dragons Emperor turned to the intelligence agent beside him. Snapping, he yelled, "Just what have you all been doing? You failed to report on 200 Tier 1 NPCs. Tell me, what is going on here?" A single level 50 Tier 1 NPC was very difficult to deal with. Each one required a team of elite members to pin down. Now that there was an additional 200, this would greatly affect his plans. Suddenly, cold sweat appeared on the forehead of the reconnaissance unit's leader. He was so frightened he could not utter a single word. Originally, he had tried to think of an excuse to save himself. However, he knew full well what kind of personality the 9 Dragons Emperor had. The more he tried to justify himself, the graver the consequences would be. "Forget it. You won't have to do your job anymore. Someone will replace you in the future." 9 Dragons Emperor waved his hand, having his subordinates escort the Recon leader out of the building and dismissing him from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. "Chaos, instruct the Blood Legion to send help. With the Blood Legion's strength, they should be able to hold back 200 NPCs. At this moment, 9 Dragons couldn't care less about how Zero Wing had managed to obtain all of these NPCs. He had no choice but to involve the originally inactive Blood Legion in the battle. Understood. This subordinate will lead them over now, Chaos Dancer nodded and smiled. A short moment later, the 1,000-strong Blood Legion, which had been on standby, charged into Zero Wing's guild residence. Meanwhile, the various large guilds watching the battle from afar were also shocked by the sudden change. Sure enough, Zero Wing is quite capable. With so many Tier 1 NPCs, even the Blood Legion will not be able to hold them off for long. After all, each level 50 Tier 1 NPC is the equivalent of a level 50 special elite. Galaxy passed side. If any other first-rate guild stood in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's place right now, they would have no chance against Zero Wing. Particularly, that large-scale silencing spell the pavilion had used before the battle began significantly restricted the NPC's combat power and had even sealed Zero Wing's large-scale destruction spells. Zero Wing had lost all their advantages with just this single move. Meanwhile, inside Zero Wing's residence, a melee battle had broken out. The scene in the residence looked just like a battlefield from ancient times. Currently, the magical classes, who boasted the highest power, could only fight using their staffs. The magical classes in God's domain were different from other virtual reality games. They were not completely incapable of participating in melee combat, but they were not specialized in it. They possessed very few skills that could be used in a melee battle. In addition, their classes mainly focused on intelligence and vitality, making them even more inferior in melee combat. At this moment, however, nobody could care less. Even the healers of either side fought each other, not to mention the other magical classes. Compared to the one-on-one fights between the magical classes, the battles between the physical classes were intense. Currently, none of them could use any skills or tools and had to rely solely on their combat techniques. It was especially true for the War Dragon Legion. A majority of the War Dragon Legion members consisted of physical classes, and every one was an expert among experts. Normally, they were capable of soloing a special elite of the same level, and some were even capable of putting up a good fight against a chieftain of the same level. Elite players could become elites in the first place not solely because of their levels being above average, it was more due to the fact that they could solo an elite monster of the same level. Hence, they were called elite players. Meanwhile, in the eyes of God's domain's ordinary players, experts were individuals capable of soloing a special elite of the same level. As for top-tier experts, in the eyes of ordinary players, they were individuals who could contend with a chieftain of the same level. Chieftains were normally bosses in party dungeons. Every member of the War Dragon Legion, at the barest minimum, was capable of confronting a chieftain of the same level by themselves. Some were even capable of killing a chieftain of the same level. Having these experts deal with 4 or 5 elite players simultaneously was a trivial matter. They might even be able to defeat 4 or 5 elite players without losing a single HP. It was just like how a chieftain could easily defeat 4 or 5 elite monsters. In the blink of an eye, the 1,000 members of the War Dragon Legion had already killed close to 3,000 Zero Wing members without suffering even a single fatality. If not for many of the War Dragon Legion's members and the Blood Legion holding back the Tier 1 NPC guards, Zero Wing's death count would have been much higher by now. However, compared to the War Dragon Legion's captain, Martial Dragon, these ordinary members of the War Dragon Legion were nothing. Martial Dragon was like a silver storm. Everywhere he passed, a rain of blood would follow. When half a dozen elite members of Zero Wing dashed up to Martial Dragon, they were instantly struck by Martial Dragon's bone-chilling and immeasurably heavy aura, their complexions turning pale and movements becoming extraordinarily sluggish. Immediately after, multiple red streaks of light weaved across their bodies, sending them flying into the air. In the next moment, blood poured out like a fountain from multiple wounds. When these elites returned to the ground, a piece of equipment dropped beside them. Their bodies were no longer capable of movement. The War Dragon Legion is truly frightening. There are many among them who are even stronger than I am. That Martial Dragon is especially impressive. If I fought him, I'm not confident that I could even block a handful of moves before he defeated me. It is no wonder why people are saying that the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's strength is the closest to a super guild. This Martial Dragon can indeed put up a fight against those old fellows, Galaxy Past stated incredulously. Super guilds had not become such because of their massive financial prowess or their large army of experts. The true reason was those inhuman experts that stood at the very top of the virtual gaming world. Martial Dragon had precisely the potential to become such an expert. I heard that Martial Dragon is a talent that only appears once every 10 years in the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion. It seems that this was not an exaggeration. Purple Eye watched Martial Dragon's figure that resembled a god of war, awe and anticipation, as well as some hints of jealousy, filling her eyes. To experts like herself, it was an instinct to revere the strong. At the same time, she also wished to challenge those powerhouses who stood at the summit. Martial Dragon was someone who had already obtained the right to challenge such individuals, so how could she not be jealous? Purple Eye even considered exchanging a few moves with Martial Dragon right this instant. Even though she knew she was no match for the man, the exchange would still benefit her immensely. If an expert wished to improve themselves quickly, they could not just rely on self-research and experimenting. They needed to fight various other experts, using the experience to learn and improve their own shortcomings. Only then could they improve quickly. While Purple Eye focused on Martial Dragon's every move, hoping to learn something through his actions, she suddenly noticed Martial Dragon's gaze shift to another location, his eyes revealing both traces of shock and excitement. Turning to look where Martial Dragon had shifted his attention to, Purple Eye similarly found herself shocked. Who is that person? Purple Eye's small mouth widened as if she had just seen a ghost. She had just watched 3 War Dragon Legion members die instantly. That's right. All 3 of them were killed in the blink of an eye. Moreover, they were the experts of the War Dragon Legion, not some noobs that could be found on the streets. Against multiple of such experts, not even Purple Eye was confident that she could emerge victorious. Yet, that person had succeeded. Moreover, she had done so with ease. After a moment of shock, Purple Eye was finally able to get a clear view of that player. Possessing an alluring appearance, she wore form-fitting black leather armor that fully displayed the graceful and mesmerizing curves of her body. She also wielded 2 blood-red short swords that emitted dazzling flames. At this moment, it was as if she stood at the center of Zero Wing's residence. That is Fire Dance. Purple Eye dared not even believe her own eyes right now. Chapter 552, Enviable Zero Wing. Chapter 552, Enviable Zero Wing. Purple Eye repeatedly rubbed her eyes and did a double take at the alluring figure. In the end, she was 100% sure she had not seen wrong. Why is this so different from what was reported? Purple Eye had read many reports on Zero Wing. The Star Alliance had gathered on every noteworthy expert in Zero Wing. There were also videos of every one of these noteworthy experts. Fire Dance was one of the few most noteworthy experts in Zero Wing. Hence, Purple Eye had a very good understanding of Fire Dance's strength. However, the data on Fire Dance had only noted her as a top-tier expert and that she was only barely able to contend with a chieftain of the same level. Hence, Purple Eye had not placed any importance on Fire Dance at all. Only Aqua Rose could be considered a worthy foe for her. Fire Dance had not even ranked on her list. Now, however, Fire Dance had easily defeated 3 top-tier experts. How could this strength not shock Purple Eye? It was especially true for that blade-like aura surrounding Fire Dance. Even while watching from such a distance, she could feel a sense of great danger with that aura. It felt as if Fire Dance could appear right before her at any time and launch an attack. With such a dazzling and dangerous aura, it was difficult for Fire Dance not to attract attention. Not to mention, there were many experts present on the battlefield, and every one of them possessed the sensitivity of a mouse. These experts detected the source of the danger instantly. 4 of the War Dragon Legion members closest to Fire Dance charged towards Fire Dance simultaneously. As if they had planned this, they coordinated their actions perfectly, launching an attack from all sides. Facing the encirclement of the 4 Legionnaires, Fire Dance's figure swayed slightly. In the next moment, only an afterimage remained in her place, denying the Legionnaires their chance to strike. Immediately, she dashed towards the closest level 27 assassin, the 2 flame-red short swords in her hands transforming into multiple blades of light that struck like vipers. As a member of the War Dragon Legion, the assassin was no ordinary player. When faced with this sudden attack, instead of retreating, he advanced. The assassin quickly saw through the trajectory of Fire Dance's short swords. Brandishing his own daggers, he deflected her attacks. One after another. After deflecting the swords of light, the assassin kicked at Fire Dance. "You're still too green," the assassin sneered. Attacks were not limited to the player's weapons. A player could use their body to attack as well. However, most players had adopted the mindset that one could only launch melee attacks with their weapons, nothing else. Hence, they would normally focus their attention on an enemy's weapons and hands. This unexpected kick right now would cost Fire Dance her life. At this moment, however, a berserker, who was a short distance away from the assassin, shouted, "Little Six, behind you." Thanks to the warning, the assassin called Little Six suddenly noticed that he had only kicked an afterimage. Behind. Little Six suddenly felt his back grow cold. His many years of combat experience and acute senses alerted him that someone was behind him. Immediately, he tried to bend his body forward in an attempt to dodge the incoming attack. However, Fire Dance did not use her short swords to attack at all. Instead, the instant she circled to the assassin's back, her slender leg kicked the assassin's thigh. Caught unprepared, the strike sent the assassin spinning into the air. Immediately after, Fire Dance swiped her blade across the assassin's throat. Overall, her actions were simple and direct with no wasted movement whatsoever. At this moment, she looked just like a veteran killer. By the time the 3 other War Dragon Legion members caught up to Fire Dance, this assassin had become a disembodied soul under Fire Dance's swords. Although the entire process seemed slow, in reality, everything had happened in the blink of an eye. In the time it took Fire Dance to steal the assassin's life, the Legionnaires had only crossed a distance of 10 yards. When the 3 Legionnaires arrived before the female player, they slid to a halt, their eyes locked onto Fire Dance's seductive body. At this moment, they no longer dared to approach this charming, yet deadly assassin casually. "Purple, why haven't I heard anything about this Fire Dance? She can actually slaughter 3 War Dragon Legion members so easily." Even now, facing 4 Legionnaires simultaneously, she dealt with one of them swiftly. Could she be a new talent that some super guild has recently nurtured? Galaxy Past asked, unable to help his shock. As the guild leader of a first-rate guild, he was very well informed regarding the virtual gaming world. Even so, from the information he had received, there was no news about a character named Fire Dance. However, his knowledge of super guild's activities was limited. As Purple Eye was someone who had come from a super guild, she should have a better understanding of super guilds. Moreover, judging from how Fire Dance had defeated the members of the War Dragon Legion so efficiently, she definitely wasn't someone new to gaming. Normally, only experts nurtured by super guilds possessed such outstanding skills. Guild leader, although I, too, think that she might be a new talent from some super guild, from what I have seen of her techniques, I can say with certainty that no super guild has nurtured her. Her every move looks more like she is fighting a real battle. Her attacks do not resemble combat techniques used in a virtual reality game, Purple Eye said, a bitter smile on her face. That makes sense. Galaxy Past nodded, a hint of jealousy surfacing in his heart. Why was he jealous? It was because Fire Dance wasn't the only person performing exceptionally on this battlefield. There was also the Guardian Knight Cola, the Assassin Flying Shadow, and many other members of Zero Wing. The combat power each of them displayed was extraordinary. Only, Fire Dance shone brightest of them all. Zero Wing could not even be considered a second-rate guild, yet it possessed so many experts. Hence, how could he not grow jealous? So what if Zero Wing has a lot of experts? So what if you can pick a fight with first-rate guilds? Now that you've offended the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, today will be your last. Watching the battle from afar, while Feng Shenyang was envious, he also celebrated Zero Wing's misfortune. Inside Zero Wing's residence, although Fire Dance and the other core members of Zero Wing were wantonly slaughtering the members of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, at the end of the day, its enemy was still the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. As the strongest legion in the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion, the War Dragon Legion would not be taken down by just a few experts. Immediately, a large number of experts began to circle Zero Wing's few top-tier experts. However, Fire Dance's situation was slightly unique from the others. Only one person came forth to deal with her. This person's appearance immediately attracted many people's attention. He was none other than the War Dragon Legion's commander, Martial Dragon, the man that stood at the apex of the War Dragon Legion. You're very skilled. Join the War Dragon Legion. I guarantee that you will immediately become one of its party leaders. After some training, you can even become the vice commander, Martial Dragon proposed as his gaze took in Fire Dance's figure. The members of the War Dragon Legion were stunned. They had never thought that Martial Dragon's evaluation of Fire Dance would be so high as to offer her the position of Vice Commander. The highest position in the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion belonged to the Pavilion Master, and following that was the Commander of the War Dragon Legion. As for the Vice Commander, that person would definitely be the third most influential person within the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion. There were countless experts within the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion hoping to climb the ladder to become the Vice Commander. And now, that position was already at Fire Dance's fingertips. You sure are insincere. I am the commander of Zero Wings core team. Why should I head over to your side to become a measly little vice commander? Fire Dance revealed a playful smile. She was not interested in the position of vice commander in the slightest. It seems you still do not know what significance the position of vice commander holds, nor do you know the significance of the position of commander. Then, I'll show you just what the commander of the War Dragon Legion is. Martial Dragon was not at all angered by Fire Dance's refusal. Unsheathing his blood-red great sword, step after step, he slowly walked towards Fire Dance. With every step that Martial Dragon took, the aura surrounding his body grew stronger. The instant Martial Dragon reached 10 yards away from Fire Dance, the latter almost retreated several steps instinctually, increasing the distance between them. At this moment, Fire Dance's expression had become extraordinarily grim, as if she were greeting a great enemy. Oh! Sure enough, I wasn't mistaken. You are able to see it, Martial Dragon laughed, becoming more satisfied with Fire Dance. Chapter 553 – The Difference of Top-Tier Equipment. Chapter 553 – The Difference of Top-Tier Equipment. How about it? This should be sufficient to convince you to join the War Dragon Legion, right? Martial Dragon asked once again. This time, instead of replying, Fire Dance quietly stared Martial Dragon. Just what kind of monster is this person? Why did I feel that death was right before me when he was still 10 yards away? After undergoing special training for a time, Fire Dance's strength had undergone a qualitative improvement. Lei Bao's training had especially helped her improve her control over her own body. Her senses had become far more sensitive as well. Meanwhile, as Fire Dance stared Martial Dragon, she felt as if she stood before a towering mountain. Particularly, when Martial Dragon was only 10 yards away from her, it felt like that towering mountain had instantly appeared above her and physically pressed down on her. At that very instant, she felt as if her life was no longer under her control. This feeling was different from the pressure she normally felt when facing a powerful enemy. It felt as if everything within a 10-yard radius of Martial Dragon was completely under the Berserker's control. Fire Dance could not believe it. She could not figure out just how Martial Dragon had achieved such a feat. Martial Dragon was clearly a Berserker. Aside from a few specific skills, a Berserker's normal attack range was limited to 5 or 6 yards. Moreover, the Dark God's descent had silenced everyone, and none of them could use any skills. Yet, Martial Dragon had an attack range of 10 yards and could even inflict a feeling of impending doom. Even Fire Dance began to wonder if she was hallucinating due to her fatigue from her recent training. However, ever since she had started playing God's Domain, her senses had not led her astray, so how could she possibly be mistaken now? Hence, Fire Dance immediately retreated from Martial Dragon. However, dragging on this fight was not a solution. After giving it some thought, Fire Dance gritted her teeth as she prepared to test herself against Martial Dragon. In the next moment, Fire Dance transformed into a black shadow as she dashed towards Martial Dragon. In terms of attributes, Fire Dance was confident that she was superior to Martial Dragon for no reason other than the Tier 1 set equipment for assassins, the Dark Melody set equipment, that Shifeng had given her. After equipping this set, not only had her attributes received a massive boost, but she was also able to display her combat power more efficiently. In front of absolute strength, all manner of trickery was useless. Regarding techniques, Fire Dance and the others had already improved significantly due to Lei Bao and Shifeng's training. They could be considered super first-rate experts. In actual combat, they were definitely superior to the ordinary members of the War Dragon Legion. They might not be able to solo a chieftain of the same level, but they could hold their ground against one for a relatively long time. After factoring in the Tier 1 set equipment and their top-tier Dark Gold weapons, they could easily solo a chieftain of the same level. They could even challenge a lord. After all, a Tier 1 set equipment was only inferior to an epic set equipment. The attribute increase it provided was no small matter. Furthermore, every one of them had equipped 3 intermediate mana armor kits. In terms of attributes, they completely overwhelmed the War Dragon Legion's ordinary members. Even against the commander of the War Dragon Legion, Martial Dragon, this was the case. The instant Fire Dance reached the 10-yard range, she turned her feet slightly, and suddenly, she split into 2 identical figures. It was practically impossible to tell which woman was real. The 2 figures then proceeded to attack Martial Dragon separately. Any ordinary player would be caught off guard and fail to react if their enemy suddenly doubled. Even an expert would hesitate. In addition, Fire Dance was very skilled. There were almost no excess movements in her attack. With lightning speed, the 2 true fire blades in Fire Dance's hands flew towards Martial Dragon's vital point and blind spot. The various large guilds watching the fight from afar were momentarily stupefied. Fire Dance's speed and ferocity were unstoppable. Their eyes could not even keep up with her. Even an expert would be finished. However, the instant before the true fire blade struck Martial Dragon, a red streak flashed, deflecting both of Fire Dance's attacks. At the same time, the resulting impact forced Fire Dance into a retreat. Is he even a berserker? How can he draw his sword so fast? Fire Dance was forced to retreat 3 steps before she stabilized her body. At this moment, however, both of her hands were numb. Berserkers were famed for their strength, so Fire Dance did not find it surprising that Martial Dragon's counterattack had repulsed her. However, she was an assassin, a class that was famed for its speed. She had clearly struck first, yet Martial Dragon still managed to block her attacks. This Fire Dance is not bad at all. Unfortunately, the gap between her and Martial Dragon is immense. It is so wide that even she hasn't realized its extent. Watching the fight from afar, Nine Dragons Emperor revealed a faint smile. Pavilion Master, how could you possibly compare that little girl to Martial Dragon? It is impressive that this little girl possesses such skill at such a young age. If she joins the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, her future will be limitless. In a few years, she might even become a second Martial Dragon. The old man serving Nine Dragons Emperor similarly smiled. Martial Dragon was one of the strongest combatants that the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion had to offer. He was also a rare talent that only appeared once a decade. The virtual gaming world changed by the day, and every year, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion would recruit a large number of players with potential. Meanwhile, the fact that Martial Dragon was known as a genius that only appeared once every 10 years in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion showed just how much talent he possessed. How could a little girl, who had never been nurtured by a super guild, possibly compete with such an individual? Before, although it seemed as though Martial Dragon's block had been extremely fast, in reality, that was not the case. It was only because Fire Dance had failed to notice Martial Dragon taking half a step backward. And it was precisely this distance that had given Martial Dragon's greatsword sufficient time to catch up to Fire Dance's short swords. The subtlety this half-step contained was the difference between Fire Dance and Martial Dragon. Before Fire Dance could recall how Martial Dragon had managed to counterattack, Martial Dragon suddenly moved. The instant he moved, Fire Dance focused all of her attention on the berserker's body. Martial Dragon's movements were very fast and polished. However, this speed was slower than Fire Dance's reactions. In an instant, Fire Dance predicted the berserker's attack route and prepared to counterattack. Since my strength is not a match for him, I'll use speed to face him. Through the previous exchange, Fire Dance had discovered her advantages and disadvantages against this opponent. Assassins possessed extremely high agility. Hence, regarding movement speed, they were leaps and bounds above berserkers. With that in mind, Fire Dance planned to fight a moving battle with Martial Dragon. Fire Dance instantly dodged the attack from Martial Dragon's great sword. She then sidestepped and sent an strike at the berserker's neck. Evade. Counterattack. It was a simple attack pattern. However, Fire Dance had completed both steps almost simultaneously. Just as Fire Dance considered following up her counterattack with another attack, her complexion suddenly paled as she felt that something was off. When her counterattack landed, she had not felt her blade slice flesh. Unfortunately, it was too late to react. Martial Dragon, who stood proudly before Fire Dance, had raised his blood-red greatsword and swung it down. A red blade of light flashed towards Fire Dance. The immense wind pressure generated by Martial Dragon's greatsword rolled up a cloud of dust along with a splatter of fresh blood. In the next moment, Fire Dance flew back, her HP rapidly falling. Fortunately, Fire Dance had a Tier 1 set equipment and 3 intermediate mana armor kits. In total, she had over 6,000 HP, even with her high defense. Although Martial Dragon possessed frightening strength, he could not kill Fire Dance with one hit, he could only reduce her HP by half. Such powerful equipment. Martial Dragon was somewhat surprised when he saw Fire Dance still standing. However, he quickly discerned the reason why he was unable to kill the assassin with a single hit. Equipment capable of allowing an assassin to survive one of his strikes definitely possessed powerful attributes. At this moment, even Martial Dragon envied Fire Dance. Even Nine Dragons Emperor, who watched the battle from afar, glared at Fire Dance enviously. It really is a wonder how you people from Zero Wing managed to obtain such exaggerated equipment. However, although your equipment is excellent, it will only prolong your suffering. Saying so, Martial Dragon advanced once more, swinging his greatsword towards Fire Dance, who had only barely recovered from her fall. Just as the red blade of light was about to strike the assassin. Who? Martial Dragon's hands suddenly froze as his gaze quickly swept through his surroundings. An expert who has awakened a domain is actually bullying a young woman who has yet to even enter the refinement realm. Aren't you ashamed? Chapter 554 – Overwhelming Attributes. Chapter 554 – Overwhelming Attributes. Although this new voice was not loud, Martial Dragon's sharp gaze immediately locked onto its origin. In the direction Martial Dragon was looking at, a plain-looking man in armor slowly emerged the warring crowd. Despite so many players focusing on killing each other, nobody had bothered to attack this man. It was as if none of these people had noticed him. Everyone was still focused on dealing with their own opponents. Only when this man's black sword pierced through the backs of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's elites, did these elites notice the man's existence. By then, however, it was too late. Since the war had begun, nobody had noticed that this ordinary-looking man had killed many War Dragon Legionnaires and Dragon Phoenix Pavilion elites. He was practically a god of silent death. One-hit Azura. Surprise and excitement filled Martial Dragon's eyes as they landed on Shifeng. Sure enough, your reputation is well deserved. You really do possess some ability. A technique that could allow one to move unnoticed was no trivial matter. The concept might sound very simple, but when it came to its realization, not many could achieve it. This required a combination of special breathing techniques and footwork. Not to mention, Shifeng even wielded this technique with such ease. Despite having met many experts in the past, Martial Dragon had never encountered one capable of such a technique. One could say that such a technique was extremely convenient in a group battle. Since this technique could allow a player to avoid attention, then it could naturally be used in reverse as well, forcing others to focus on oneself. Martial Dragon had originally intended to finish off Fire Dance with his last attack. However, due to that sudden surge of killing intent from Shifeng, Martial Dragon felt as if someone had suddenly appeared behind him. Martial Dragon had no choice but to halt his attack in order to respond to the new enemy, allowing Fire Dance to escape with her life as a result. Fire Dance, go deal with someone else. Leave him to me. Shifeng sent Fire Dance a private message. Guild leader, be careful. Fire Dance nodded. Although Fire Dance was reluctant, she turned and moved to deal with other enemies. Martial Dragon glanced at Fire Dance's departing figure, not bothering to chase after the assassin. Instead, he focused his attention on the slowly approaching Shifeng. What's going on with Martial Dragon? Fire Dance was within his grasp. Why didn't he finish her off before moving on to deal with Black Flame? Feng Xianyang, who watched the fight from afar, shouted with frustration and confusion. His hatred for Zero Wing ran deep, and he wanted nothing more than to kill Zero Wing's upper managers hundreds of times. If not for Zero Wing, he would not have encountered so many problems. He would have long since become the hidden overlord of Star Moon Kingdom's eastern region rather than ending up in his current dire state. He even had to obey the 7 ghosts. Young Master Feng, Martial Dragon is not at fault here. It isn't because Martial Dragon didn't wish to finish her off, but because he couldn't, Third Ghost said, laughing bitterly. He then explained, Fire Dance is much faster than Martial Dragon. If she focuses on running away, even Martial Dragon cannot catch her. Not to mention, Black Flame has currently locked onto Martial Dragon. If he attempts to chase after Fire Dance, he will reveal a gap in his defense, giving Black Flame an opportunity to attack. Black Flame's combat power is astounding. He is far above Fire Dance. Moreover, that technique that makes others ignore his presence is also the perfect technique for assassinations. If Martial Dragon focused on Fire Dance, it is very likely that he would feel the bite of Black Flame's sword. How could Martial Dragon possibly dare to focus on Fire Dance? Then, are you saying that there is a possibility that Black Flame will defeat Martial Dragon? Resentment boiled up in Feng Xianyang as he listened to Third Ghost's words. In the beginning, Black Flame had been a nobody, insignificant, while he was a member of Underworld. Black Flame had spoiled his good fortune many times, yet, the more he fought Black Flame, the more he discovered how helpless he was against the man. At this point, he could do practically nothing against Black Flame. Chuckling, Third Ghost confidently said, Martial Dragon is very powerful. I only said that Black Flame had a chance against Martial Dragon while he was distracted. However, if Martial Dragon focuses on his opponent, Black Flame has almost no chance of emerging victorious. What do you mean? Feng Xianyang asked curiously. This is something I heard from Boss First Ghost, but it seems that Martial Dragon has already awakened his domain. In a direct confrontation, it is simply impossible to defeat Martial Dragon. Even if we, the 7 ghosts, worked together, it is unlikely that we could defeat Martial Dragon in a head-on clash. When Third Ghost uttered the word domain, reverence appeared on his face. Domain. Within a certain range, the wielder of the domain could achieve absolute control. One could even count the number of raindrops that fell in their domain. Only by training one's 5 senses to their extreme limits could one reach such a realm of control. Domains were practically a myth. Normally, only the geniuses among geniuses had the possibility of grasping such a technique. One could say that domains were the dreams that countless experts sought. While Third Ghost explained the situation, Martial Dragon and Shifeng gradually approached each other. 30 yards. 20 yards. 15 yards. One after another, the upper managers of the various large guilds witnessing this war shifted their gaze towards these 2 players. One was Star Moon Kingdom's #1 expert, Black Flame, while the other was the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion's top fighter, Martial Dragon. Both were peerless experts that could deter an army by themselves, so how could they possibly miss out on a battle between the 2? Guild leader, who do you think will win? Purple, I asked. Although she was a top-tier expert herself, she had no idea what the outcome of this battle would be as she had never witnessed either of the 2 fight with their full power. I suspect Martial Dragon will win. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion is a super first-rate guild. Moreover, you should have seen the strength Martial Dragon displayed a moment ago. That's a domain. Envy and admiration filled Galaxy Past's gaze as he looked at Martial Dragon. Rumor has it that Martial Dragon qualifies to compete with those old monsters, and it would seem that those rumors are true. I wonder when I will be able to set foot on that stage as well. Purple, I nodded in agreement. In reality, she really hoped that Black Flame would emerge victorious. After all, there had yet to be a single first-rate guild daring enough to provoke the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, yet, Black Flame had done just that. One could not help but admire the man. Now, he even faced off against a combat genius like Martial Dragon. Unfortunately, Black Flame had yet to reach that stage. Moreover, the difference in the number of experts between Zero Wing and the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was simply too huge. There was no room for Zero Wing to resist. When there was only a distance of 10 yards, Shifeng suddenly stopped. "Why aren't you advancing?" Martial Dragon stood proudly, his gaze fixed on Shifeng. With a disdainful look, he asked, "Or do you intend to run away?" Shifeng remained silent, paying no heed to Martial Dragon's provocation. "Since you aren't going to come to me, I'll go to you." Martial Dragon brandished his great sword and dashed towards Shifeng like a fierce tiger, his body carrying an overwhelming momentum that pressed down on Shifeng. Yet, Shifeng remained motionless as he welcomed Martial Dragon's attack. Martial Dragon took no time at all to cross the distance of 10 yards. Arriving before Shifeng, Martial Dragon swung his blood-red greatsword, the weapon transforming into a streak of red light as it slashed towards its target. Martial Dragon's attack was both simple and crude. At this time, Shifeng, who had made no effort whatsoever to dodge the oncoming attack, finally moved, the abyssal blade in his hand transforming into a streak of light as it met Martial Dragon's greatsword. Boom! When the two swords clashed, a crisp low-pitched sound echoed throughout the Zero Wing residence. The pure exchange of blows between the two powerhouses caused even the pavement to crack and shatter beneath their feet. Martial Dragon was abruptly forced to retreat by 5 steps, the numbness in his arms spreading to his scalp. Martial Dragon then shifted his gaze to Shifeng, and what he saw left him stupefied. Shifeng stood steady in his original position like an immovable mountain. The difference in their strengths was obvious. Chapter 555 Winner and Loser. Chapter 555 Winner and Loser. Black Flame pushed Martial Dragon back. Silence. Every Dragon Phoenix Pavilion member within Zero Wing's residence was dumbfounded. Meanwhile, the players watching from afar were similarly rendered speechless, their minds repeatedly playing that scene from before. Although neither side had used any profound techniques and had only exchanged a straightforward blow, it was precisely this simplicity that allowed everyone to see the difference between the two very clearly. Shifeng's attributes were absolutely mind-blowing. Shit. Just what kind of equipment is Black Flame wearing? Feng Xuanyang's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets at this scene. Martial Dragon was a level 28 berserker. Moreover, the majority of his equipment was level 25 dark gold equipment. The weapon he wielded was even one of indiscernible quality, but judging from its appearance, it should certainly be above dark gold rank. This equipment composition could definitely be among the very best in God's domain. Even if Black Flame were fully geared in dark gold equipment, he would not be that much stronger than Martial Dragon. Moreover, Black Flame was only a swordsman, a very well-balanced class in terms of attributes. Normally, a swordsman's strength would be inferior to a berserker's, and his agility would be inferior to an assassin's. Yet, now, Black Flame had actually managed to force back an apex berserker like Martial Dragon with a single hit. Just how outstanding was Black Flame's equipment to pull off such a feat? At this moment, Nine Dragons Emperor, who was leisurely watching the battle from afar, had an expression of immense joy on his face, his eyes fully focused on Shifeng as if he had just seen a peerless beauty. Although Nine Dragons Emperor was indeed surprised at seeing Martial Dragon forced into a retreat, he was much more delighted at discovering the peerless equipment that made such a feat possible. "Uncle Chen, order the ones below to obtain Black Flame's equipment." Nine Dragons Emperor instructed the old man beside him, his eyes shining brightly. "Understood." The old man addressed as Uncle Chen immediately made a bow and left his position. A short moment later, the old man arrived with quick steps at the balcony of the private room, then abruptly shouted, "War Dragon Legion, listen up. Plunder every piece of equipment on Black Flame's body and leave nothing behind." Although the old man was quite aged, his voice was extraordinarily loud when he shouted. Practically everyone in the neighborhood had heard him. Is the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion stupid? Didn't they see how Black Flame repulsed Martial Dragon in a single hit? Who could possibly kill him and plunder his equipment? Also, even if they plan on plundering someone's equipment, there shouldn't be a need to announce it publicly like that, right? Some ordinary players spectating from the sidelines ridiculed. When the members of Zero Wing heard the old man's words, they nearly spat out blood in anger. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was completely looking down on them. For a time, Zero Wing's members fought with even greater ferocity. Although the spectating ordinary players made fun of Nine Dragons' Emperor's foolishness, none of the upper managers of other first-rate guilds were laughing. They knew full well just how powerful the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was. Despite the currently brief duration of the battle, the death toll was already extremely frightening. The battlefield, which initially had nearly 30,000 players, now had less than 20,000 players remaining. The majority of the survivors also belonged to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Even the War Dragon Legion had over 800 members still alive. Overall, the pavilion's losses were light. In contrast, Zero Wing's side. Things were just terrible on this side. Many elite members had died, and only 200 or so Tier 1 players remained. Zero Wing had lost nearly half of its main combat power. If not for the Tier 1 NPCs, Zero Wing's situation would be much uglier. The gap between the two guilds was evident at a single glance. They simply could not be compared to each other. Black Flame repulsing Martial Dragon? What was there to celebrate? These people really think Black Flame has a chance of winning. Third Ghost sneered as he looked at the distant spectating ordinary players. That was the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion Zero Wing was going up against, a super first-rate guild in the virtual gaming world. Moreover, the pavilion had even sent out its War Dragon Legion this time around. Zero Wing had no chance of victory at all. Moreover, Martial Dragon was a peerless expert who had grasped a domain. Although Black Flame had the advantage in attributes, the gap was not so great that it was impassable. Any expert would be able to discern this point very clearly. Hence, Nine Dragons' Emperor did not take Black Flame seriously at all and was fully intent on obtaining the swordsman's equipment. Inside Zero Wing's residence, Martial Dragon and Shifeng had already exchanged moves dozens of times. Every time Shifeng attacked, he forced Martial Dragon into a retreat, chipping at Martial Dragon's HP with each exchange. At this moment, Martial Dragon's HP was down to around 90%. However, Shifeng was not particularly happy about this situation, neither was he angry about Nine Dragons' Emperor's plan to plunder all his equipment. He only felt helpless. Although Shifeng succeeded in suppressing Martial Dragon with his attributes, the Berserker was, after all, an expert who had grasped a domain. Since Martial Dragon knew that he could not win using brute force, he had gone with a softer approach to neutralize Shifeng's attacks. Negating Shifeng's power was practically impossible for ordinary experts. After all, Shifeng was an expert who had already set foot in the flowing water realm. If one wanted to negate Shifeng's power, they required inhuman levels of precision and confidence. The fact that Martial Dragon could achieve such a feat was all due to his domain. Of course, while Shifeng was helpless against Martial Dragon right now, the same could be said for the Berserker. After all, Shifeng could see through his attack trajectories. Whenever Martial Dragon tried attacking Shifeng, the latter would always take the appropriate defensive measures and force the exchange into a frontal clash between weapons. In a frontal clash, the side with lower strength would naturally receive damage and lose HP. Hence, Martial Dragon could only buy time. However, Martial Dragon was in no rush. Zero Wing was vulnerable. Fire Dance alone could not turn the situation around. This was not an arena. There was no need for players to fight one-on-one. If 3 to 5 legionnaires were insufficient, they could simply increase that number. Even if Fire Dance had powerful attributes, the War Dragon Legion could just treat her as a powerful boss and slowly grind her to death. You are the first person who has lasted this long against me. Unfortunately, this match won't go on for much longer, Martial Dragon said ruefully as he glanced at his surroundings. The number of Zero Wing members still alive was rapidly decreasing. After another 10 minutes or so, this war would come to an end. This outcome was all due to the difference in the number and quality of experts. Even with so many NPCs filling the gap, they were still far from enough. Indeed, this battle will not last much longer. Shifeng's heart ached over this situation as well. The losses Zero Wing had suffered in this war was simply too massive. Yet, instead of revealing a dispirited expression, Shifeng smiled, saying, however, the victor in this war will still be us, Zero Wing. Do you not see the situation your guild is in right now? Martial Dragon could not help but laugh when he heard Shifeng's words. However, shortly after Martial Dragon had spoken, the berserker's expression suddenly turned grave. An ambush? Martial Dragon suddenly felt a killing intent that was even more intense than when Shifeng had revealed himself. Martial Dragon promptly tried to put some distance between Shifeng and himself. However, Shifeng did not allow Martial Dragon to do so, sticking closely to the berserker at all times. In terms of speed, Martial Dragon was simply no match for Shifeng. Just as Martial Dragon faced Shifeng's barrage of attacks, the shadow of a figure suddenly appeared behind Martial Dragon. Scram! Martial Dragon had already been on his guard against this figure. Tightening his grip on his great sword, he swung the weapon towards his back with all his might, the weapon itself transforming into a streak of red light. Under normal circumstances, this sudden attack definitely would have caught the player, who had appeared behind Martial Dragon, by surprise. Dang! However, this red blade of light was easily blocked. Martial Dragon finally managed to get a clear look at the ambusher and was stunned. This man had grey hair and a tall, robust body that was significantly larger than an ordinary person's. Also, this man was not a player but an NPC. Although this NPC was only level 40, lower than those level 50 tier 1 guards, the pressure Martial Dragon felt from him was even stronger than what he'd felt from a High Lord. However, Martial Dragon had no time to ponder the identity of this NPC, because the moment this NPC swung his sword, over a dozen wind blades flew at Martial Dragon from all sides. Only Shifeng knew what this skill was. Tier 2 sword skill, Wind Roar. This skill could not be blocked and could only be dodged. But Martial Dragon no longer had time to dodge right now. In the blink of an eye, multiple wind blades devoured Martial Dragon, his 6,000 plus HP instantly bottoming out with not a single point remaining. The ambusher was none other than Shifeng's personal guard, Kite. Only, at this moment, Kite had already recovered his original strength. No longer was he a tier 1 swordsman but a tier 2 sword master, instead. Chapter 556, Might of a Sword Master. Chapter 556, Might of a Sword Master. He actually died, just like that. That's Martial Dragon. How could someone possibly kill him with one hit? When did that frightening NPC appear? For a time, the upper managers of the various guilds spectating the battle were stupefied. Commander. Martial Dragon's abrupt death stopped the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion members' rising momentum cold. As the commander of the War Dragon Legion, Martial Dragon had never died, not even once, ever since he entered God's domain. Not even Hell Mode Team Dungeons could end his life. The elites of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and the members of the War Dragon Legion all admired Martial Dragon greatly, using him as their role model. One could say that Martial Dragon was the symbol of the War Dragon Legion, as well as the Legion's backbone. Now that their backbone suddenly disappeared, even the members of the War Dragon Legion were dumbfounded. They had never once thought that Martial Dragon would die. As if adding insult to injury, he was a casualty in a war of annihilation against a small guild. That damnable Black Flame, he actually has another hidden trump card. A chilling light flashed across Nine Dragons' Emperor's eyes as he glared at Shifeng. However, even if you have the help of a level 40 tier 2 NPC, you will all still perish today. Uncle Chen, head into the battlefield with Blood Dragon. Do not let Black Flame get away at all cost. The same goes for that tier 2 NPC. Martial Dragon was renowned throughout the entire virtual gaming world. He was practically synonymous with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and was also the proof of the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion's strength. Yet, now, Martial Dragon had actually been killed in a war with a minor guild like Zero Wing. If news of this matter were to spread, the damage to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's reputation would be severe. At this moment, the only way to redeem the pavilion's reputation was to thoroughly consign Zero Wing to history and have everyone know what the consequences were for angering the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Presently, Zero Wing had only a small number of members left alive. On the other hand, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion suffered only minimal losses among its main experts. Although a Tier 2 NPC was mighty, fortunately, it was just a level 40 NPC roughly equivalent to a level 40 Lord. With the number of experts in the War Dragon Legion, they could easily defeat a level 40 lord. Understood. The old man addressed as Uncle Chen bowed and departed. From an outsider's point of view, this Uncle Chen was only a butler of 9 Dragons Emperor. However, every upper manager in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion knew that this old man with a head full of white hair was not just 9 Dragons Emperor's butler. He was the 3rd person to command the War Dragon Legion, Dust Dragon. However, this detail was something in the annals of history. Currently, most people had long since forgotten that this elderly man named Uncle Chen was the almighty Dust Dragon of the past. When the War Dragon Legion received the command, they immediately went into a frenzy. They no longer bothered targeting the elites of Zero Wing. Instead, hundreds of them encircled Shifeng and Kite. Every one of these hundreds of experts was level 27 or above, and they all wore top-tier equipment. Moreover, at this level, most players had at least some equipment with the Ignore levels attribute. In other words, members of the War Dragon Legion would not have to worry about level suppression when fighting Kite, a level 40 NPC. Normally, the War Dragon Legion members could trounce a level 40 Field Lord with just a single 20-man team. Meanwhile, hundreds of them were present right now. Blood Dragon, a branch leader of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, and Dust Dragon, a former commander of the War Dragon Legion, were even leading the Legionnaires personally. Even if the enemy was a level 40 High Lord, they could still defeat it. Ha ha ha. Black Flame is doomed for sure this time. Rather than dealing a blow to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's momentum, he has instead angered the pavilion even more. Feng Shenyang could not help but chortle when he saw this scene. Not only is he surrounded by so many top-tier experts, but he also can't use any of his skills. If we 7 ghosts were in such a situation, we would still face annihilation even if all of us worked together, 3rd ghost commented. Everyone had originally been fearful of Martial Dragon already. Now that they saw this scene, they finally realized just how powerful the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's true strength is simply too powerful. It really isn't something we first-rate guilds can hope to contend with. It seems that I'll have to make some changes to our future development plans. Galaxy Past felt helpless as he looked at the tightly packed members of the War Dragon Legion. Top-tier experts were individuals that large guilds would only rarely encounter. Yet, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion actually managed to dispatch 1,000 of them. With such power, who could possibly oppose the pavilion? Galaxy Past had even visualized the Star Alliance being in Zero Wing's place right now. In the end, he concluded that the Star Alliance would not fare any better than Zero Wing. In other words, not to mention the Phoenix Pavilion of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, just the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion alone was enough to annihilate the Star Alliance. The gap between a first-rate guild and a super first-rate guild was simply hopeless. Guild leader, look. Black Flame has begun taking action. Purple Eye, who was standing beside Galaxy Past, recalled him to the battle at hand. Zero Wing's destruction was inevitable. The only thing worth watching now was seeing how many experts of the War Dragon Legion Black Flame would manage to kill. As for escaping, that was practically impossible. As the guild leader, if Black Flame abandoned his own guild residence to escape, he would only turn himself into a laughingstock. His only option now was to fight till the bitter end. Either he survived by forcing his enemies to retreat, or he perished along with his guild residents. There was no third option. Without hesitation, Shifeng, along with Kite, dashed directly towards the oncoming army of experts. They did not bother taking a roundabout route to conduct guerrilla warfare. Has this Black Flame lost his mind? Galaxy Past watched Shifeng's movement patterns with utter bewilderment. When the enemy had the advantage in numbers, one would normally apply hit-and-run tactics to avoid letting their enemies completely surround them. Applying such guerrilla tactics would yield tremendous results, especially when one's combat power was significantly superior to the enemy's. However, Shifeng had actually taken the initiative to charge into the enemy's encirclement. He was simply trying to get himself killed. Since you wish to die, let me grant you that wish. Blood Dragon revealed a sinister sneer. Back when the curse scrolls were used, he had been outside the effective radius of Dark God's descent. Hence, When Blood Dragon was only 30 yards away from Shifeng, he immediately activated charge. He then raised his sword, activating heavy chop as he swung the weapon at Shifeng. Meanwhile, Dust Dragon, who was a short distance away, had similarly used charge. He had timed his skill perfectly so that he would arrive just a moment later than Blood Dragon, preventing Shifeng from blocking both of their attacks. In God's domain, although a person might seem old, their bodies in the game remained strong. Hence, there was not much of a difference between Dust Dragon's current combat power and his combat power back when he was still in his prime. On the contrary, his combat experience far surpassed the ordinary person's. He was like a living fossil of the virtual gaming world. He had long since reached the realm of perfection in the control and usage of techniques. Looking to die. Shifeng could not help but smile when he looked at the two people swiftly approaching him. Kite was no ordinary NPC. He was a dark gold ranked personal guard, and he could easily beat up a player of the same level and tier. When Kite was still a tier 1 swordsman, he was already capable of contending against a high lord of the same level. Contending against higher levels might be a different story, but with his strength back to that of a tier 2 swordmaster, he could even go toe-to-toe with a level 40 Great Lord now. What did a level 40 Great Lord hint at? The final boss of a level 20, 100-man Hell Mode team dungeon was only a level 20 Great Lord. But there had yet to be a single person daring enough to go challenge such a monster even until now. Out in the fields, a level 40 Great Lord would annihilate a 1,000-man team of level 40 players, not to mention a 100-man team. Meanwhile, the War Dragon Legion consisted of only several hundred players. Moreover, none of them was even close to reaching level 40 yet. They also did not possess any level 40 top-tier equipment. Yet, they still dared to come charging over. Their recklessness left Shifeng speechless. If he truly had to describe them, he would say that they were remarkably courageous. The moment Blood Dragon and Dust Dragon came rushing over, Kite moved in front of Shifeng. The sword master then swung his sword down at the two aggressors. Instantly, dozens of wind blades struck both Blood Dragon and Dust Dragon from all sides. In the blink of an eye, both berserkers were lying on the ground, already dead. Chapter 557 – Qualifications to become an Overlord. Chapter 557 – Qualifications to become an Overlord. What kind of NPC is this? Nine Dragons Emperor shot up from his seat the instant he saw Blood Dragon and Dust Dragon instant killed, an expression of shock plastered over his face. Nobody had a better understanding than he did of Blood Dragon's and Dust Dragon's strengths. Although the two of them were not a match for Martial Dragon, no one was likely to be a match for them when the two of them were working together. Even a level 40 High Lord would not be able to kill both of them in a single strike. The only possibility was that this NPC was too powerful, so powerful that players simply had no way of resisting him. Kite, kill them all. Leave none alive. Shifeng no longer held back. He immediately commanded Kite to begin his slaughter. In the past, Kite was titled the Windbreaker. In the entire God's domain, very few personal guards possessed a title. The title itself, though, was only a title. It did not provide any bonus attributes or contribute to the improvement of the personal guard's combat power. However, having a title signified that an NPC was not an ordinary class but a hidden class. Some hidden classes were weak, while some were strong. Windbreaker definitely ranked within the peak classes. In addition, as a personal guard, Kite himself also possessed frightening growth potential. Hence, Kite had become practically invincible when going up against an enemy of the same level and tier in the past. Back in the days, the lifestyle player that owned Kite had relied on this personal guard to become an existence that nobody in God's domain could ignore. Even super guilds did not wish to offend this lifestyle player casually. What about now? Back then, even a lifestyle player had managed to nurture Kite into a tier 5 sword saint capable of overwhelming any tier 5 player or NPC. Meanwhile, in this life, Shifeng was the one nurturing Kite. Not only could Shifeng provide greater financial support, but Kite's current growth potential was also higher than what he had in the past. Now, dealing with players of a lower level and tier was practically child's play to Kite. After Kite received Shifeng's command, he transformed into a fierce gale that swept across the members of the War Dragon Legion. The Shield Warriors and Guardian Knights of the War Dragon Legion hurriedly dashed to the forefront, attempting to block Kite's assault. Unfortunately for them, Kite was just too fast. With a simple leap, he arrived behind the Shield Warriors and Guardian Knights. He then used a Tier 2 skill, Wind Ferret, sending all players within 30 yards flying up into the air. In the next moment, Kite began brandishing his swords, shooting hundreds of wind blades outwards like a lotus flower that pierced the bodies of the players suspended in midair. Even though these players were Shield Warriors and Guardian Knights, their HPs still fell by the thousands. In the blink of an eye, their 6,000 or 7,000 HPs bottomed out, though a fortunate few managed to survive Kite's barrage of attacks. However, as they were too high up in the air, when they landed on the ground, the fall took away their last strand of HP. In just a moment, the War Dragon Legion had lost dozens of members. Seeing this scene where players fell to the ground like dumplings, one after another, everyone was utterly stupefied. Nobody had imagined that a Tier 2 NPC could actually be this mighty. Moreover, aside from him being strong, even Kite's combat techniques were more powerful than those of many experts. The Windbreaker is indeed amazing. It is no wonder he was able to deal with so many Tier 5 players as if they were little children in the past. Only Tier 6 God-ranked players were able to suppress him. Shifeng was delighted with Kite's performance. When it came to techniques, there were indeed players that could surpass Kite. Unfortunately, the precondition for this victory was that said player was similar to Martial Dragon, a peerless expert who had achieved 100% control over his own body. However, even in the entire God's domain, such experts were as rare as a phoenix's feather. Moreover, even if a player was superior to Kite in terms of combat techniques, as an NPC, Kite could completely overwhelm any player when it came to attributes. In front of absolute strength, all manner of trickery was useless. In the end, the amount of strength a player could display through their techniques was limited. It was just like how Shifeng, despite his techniques being inferior to Martial Dragon's, was able to suppress the Berserker by relying on his attributes. Only, in Kite's case, the NPC could trounce Martial Dragon, because Kite's attributes were leaps and bounds above even Shifeng's. Such great strength was already beyond Martial Dragon's ability to withstand. Hence, Kite was able to kill Martial Dragon easily while Shifeng could not. In just a moment, Zero Wing had made a complete comeback from their previously disadvantaged situation. To the War Dragon Legion, which had a member count of only 1,000, having more than 100 of its experts killed was a significant loss. Most importantly, its casualties continued to increase. Despite Nine Dragons Emperor's attempts to pin down Kite by sending more elite players and experts, all his efforts were in vain. With Kite's speed, strength, and techniques, any player that had yet to attain their Tier 2 class would not even have the qualifications to delay him. Otherwise, the many first-rate guilds and super guilds in the past would not have feared him so much. Seeing how Kite was casually slaughtering the members of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, the spectating upper managers of the various large guilds were dumbfounded. With such an NPC guarding their guild residence, no guild is capable of threatening Zero Wing, Galaxy Past muttered as he looked at Kite. He then shifted his gaze towards Shifeng, who was leisurely observing the battle from the sidelines, his eyes filled with both admiration and envy. Although the status of a first-rate guild might seem preeminent, in reality, there was a massive gap between a first-rate guild and a super guild. If the Star Alliance managed to anger a super guild in the future, a repeat of today's scene was highly likely. However, if the Star Alliance had an NPC like Kite guarding its guild residence, at that time, it would possess the qualifications to pick a fight with a super guild. Although they still could not afford to provoke a super guild, they would no longer have to live in fear like they currently did. As long as a guild's residence remained, and as long as the guild still possessed a large sum of funds and coins, then it would be a cockroach that would not die. In the virtual gaming world, it was not the powerful who were considered strong. Instead, it was those who managed to survive and was not afraid of any enemy that were deemed to be strong. After all, only by surviving would there be hope. It was just like how those super guilds had managed to survive until now. In the past, There were far more powerful existences than these super guilds. Yet, in the end, didn't they end up failing as well? Meanwhile, although Zero Wing was still weak right now, it already possessed the qualifications to become an overlord in God's domain. Hence, how could Galaxy Past not admire Shafong? Purple, once we return, immediately mobilize the entire guild. Our Star Alliance needs an NPC like that as well. Galaxy Past's eyes were filled with desire as he looked at Kite. Purple eyes silently nodded in agreement. However, instead of looking at Kite, she was currently focused on Aqua Rose. At this moment, her eyes were filled with mixed feelings. Time slowly passed by. The battlefield grew more intense with each passing moment. Currently, only a small number of players from Zero Wing remained alive. As for the guild's most precious Tier 1 players, less than 100 remained alive. This time, however, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was not having a good time, either. Due to Kite's appearance, coupled with Shafong silently helping out his guildmates, the War Dragon Legion's numbers fell sharply. Currently, less than 400 legionnaires remained alive. Retreat. All of you, retreat. 9 Dragons Emperor sent a command to the members of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, no longer able to stomach this battle. Pavilion Master, Zero Wing is about to be destroyed. Are we really going to retreat right now? Rage had long since overwhelmed many of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's upper managers fighting in the battlefield. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's prestige and reputation were also at stake here. How could they possibly be willing to retreat at a time like this? I said retreat. Are you unable to understand that? 9 Dragons Emperor suddenly said in a low tone, his gloomy voice chilling even his surroundings. 9 Dragons Emperor wanted to continue fighting this war as well. He even wished he could personally step onto the battlefield. However, he was a guild leader. He needed to consider the bigger picture. Although their side still seemed to possess the numerical advantage, in reality, they were already at a disadvantage. If this situation continued, instead of Zero Wing being destroyed, they would be the ones facing complete annihilation. In order to cut their losses, they had no choice but to retreat right now. Understood. Retreat. All members, retreat. The members of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion could only sigh in dejection. Under the command of the upper managers, they swiftly withdrew from Zero Wing's guild residence. Chapter 558 After the War. Chapter 558 After the War. 1. We won. Everyone from Zero Wing was incomparably excited, and they all began cheering loudly one after another. Throughout this entire war, nobody had expected them to win. Even the large guilds watching from afar had long since made preparations to take advantage of Zero Wing's misfortune. Originally, other than super guilds, nobody else dared to oppose the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. However, they had dared. Moreover, they had even defeated the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. They had achieved a feat that no guild had ever imagined was possible. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was actually defeated, just like that. The various large guilds spectating this battle fell silent. Other than shock, everyone felt amazement. Despite the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's overwhelming power, in the end, all those elite players and frightening top-tier experts suffered defeat at the hands of a single NPC guard. After we return, we must focus on developing our guild's guards. Galaxy Past had an excited expression on his face as he watched the retreating members of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. The true strength of a super guild was something no ordinary guild could ever hope to comprehend. Only first-rate guilds like them would know some secrets about super guilds. Although the opponent Zero Wing had defeated this time was not a super guild, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's strength was already on a par with those super guilds. Since Zero Wing could repel the attack of the pavilion, it could naturally repel the attacks of super guilds as well. Most likely, nobody in the entire God's domain had thought that. The first guild capable of going toe-to-toe with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion would not be a first-rate guild but a recently established guild like Zero Wing, instead. However, this was still not the most exciting part. The most exciting part was that Zero Wing had shown everyone present the hope of contending against a super guild. In virtual reality games, The result of a war between guilds usually depended on players. However, God's domain was different. Here, NPC guards could also determine the outcome of a guild war. In other words, the advantage a super guild possessed was no longer an insurmountable hurdle. If a guild's players could not repel an attack, they could just fill the gap using NPCs. At this moment, Galaxy Past wasn't the only one planning to focus on nurturing his guild's NPC guards. The upper managers of the various large guilds had also grasped this point. They all had the notion of developing their NPCs once they returned. As long as their guild residences had an NPC like Kite protecting it, then their guild residences would be impregnable. That way, they could disregard those powerful super guilds. They could develop their guilds however they pleased. Although the members of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion were swiftly withdrawing, Shifeng had no intention of letting them off the hook. Instead, he immediately expanded on his victory, killing as many as pavilion members as he could. Every player present was an elite or above. The quality of the equipment they wore on their bodies went without saying. Each additional death was equivalent to obtaining another piece of good equipment. During the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's withdrawal, Shifeng and Kite managed to kill several hundred more players, obtaining a bountiful harvest, particularly of the life force points Shifeng collected. Damn it! Nine Dragons' Emperor's heart bled when he saw his guild's elites and the experts of the War Dragon Legion dying one after another. Black Flame, just you wait. Sooner or later, I will definitely claim this debt. You won't be as lucky the next time we meet. After the war ended, Zero Wings members also began collecting their spoils of war. Both guilds had suffered an immense death toll in this war. However, during the intense battle, nobody had the time to pick up loot. Hence, plenty of equipment littered the ground right now. This sight stirred greed and jealousy in many of the spectating guilds. However, not a single guild player dared to steal some equipment for themselves. The same held true even for the assassins who were in stealth. A large number of NPCs still stood guard near these drops, and everyone had already witnessed just how powerful these NPCs were. Naturally, nobody wanted to donate their own equipment to Zero Wing. At the same time, word of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's defeat spread at the speed of light. Practically all the discussions on the official forums mentioned this incident. It can't be, right? The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion actually lost. You must be joking. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion really lost. I have first-hand video documentation here, and you can have it for just 50 credit. A majority of the players in God's domain was incredulous of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's defeat. The pavilion, which had remained unshakable all this time, had actually been defeated. It was a rout. Even the pavilion's most powerful War Dragon Legion had lost over half of its members. The damage the pavilion had suffered this time was simply incalculable. Starmoon City, inside Ouroboros's guild residence. Snow, Zero Wing actually won against the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, just like you guessed it would. Zhao Yueru's unblemished face was full of surprise when she received the latest news regarding the war between Zero Wing and the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. There's nothing surprising about this, Gentle Snow said, a bright smile appearing on her face. Black Flame is no fool. Moreover, he has never done anything he was not confident about. Since he dared to pick a fight with the pavilion, he naturally had basis for his confidence. Only, I never imagined that the source of his confidence would be so powerful. We're in luck this time. Since we're allies with Zero Wing, those elders whom Cao Chenghua is planning to pull to his side will have to carefully reconsider their actions, Zhao Yueru laughed. Moments after Zhao Yueru said these words, the doors to the meeting room opened, and a few gorgeously dressed middle-aged men and women entered. Seeing the arrival of these few people, Gentle Snow could not help but smile bitterly as she shook her head. Fate truly knows how to toy with people. These men and women were none other than Ouroboros's few highly skilled and influential elders. Normally, these elders paid little heed to the matters of the guild, focusing only on grinding, leveling up, and raiding dungeons. Even Cao Chenghua dared not offend these elders casually. Previously, Gentle Snow had tried inviting these elders for a discussion on some matters. However, they had simply ignored her overtures. Now, without even requiring her invitation, these people had taken the initiative to come looking for her. This situation left Gentle Snow speechless. Back then, she had only decided to become Zero Wing's ally to repay her debt to Black Flame. Now, however, it would seem that she was growing even more beholden to him, instead. Guild Leader Snow, we truly apologize for before. The few of us have been busy raiding dungeons all this time, so we failed to meet up with you. Now, however, we are already clear on the guild's situation. The few of us here have unanimously decided to support you fully. If Cao Chenghua dares to try to split up Ouroboros, he will have to go through us first before he can do so, the leading shield warrior declared, chuckling. Now that Zero Wing had defeated the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, a super first-rate guild, its fame and status in God's domain were naturally far different from before. Prior to Zero Wing's appearance, the upper managers of various large guilds were secretly doing their best to forge connections with super guilds to increase their authority inside their own guilds. Many large guilds had even taken the initiative to curry favor with super guilds to obtain the protection of these super guilds. That way, if other guilds wanted to make a move on them, these guilds would have to think twice before taking action against them. After all, nobody wished to incur the anger of a super guild. Meanwhile, now that Zero Wing had defeated the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, the consequences were obvious. In the future, Zero Wing might very well become another super first-rate guild. When a man became powerful, those near him could ride on his coattails to success as well. Since Gentle Snow was an ally of Zero Wing, that meant that Gentle Snow had the support of what amounted to a super first-rate guild. As long as one was not a fool, they would know which side they should choose. White River City, Zero Wing's residence. Guild leader, I've already tallied up the results of the war. Here are the statistics, Aqua Rose said, a smile on her face as she handed over a list of data to Shifeng. How could there be so many? We've really made a fortune this time. The corners of Shifeng's lips twitched slightly when he looked at the list. Chapter 559, Growing Stronger. Chapter 559, Growing Stronger. The number of equipment on the statistical list exceeded 20,000. Most of the equipment originally belonged to the Zero Wing members who had participated in the war, so those had to be returned. In addition, they had to take into account the reward for killing enemy players as well as death subsidies. However, even after deducting all the necessary expenses, they still had over 5,000 pieces of equipment remaining. Initially, Shifeng thought Zero Wing would only gain a slight profit from this war. After all, Zero Wing's army of over 10,000 elites had practically suffered complete annihilation. Only a few hundred elites remained alive at the end of the war. As for the Tier 1 core members, only several dozens survived. The compensation for the losses of over 10,000 elite members and hundreds of core members was astronomical. Having a surplus of more than 5,000 pieces of equipment surpassed Shifeng's expectations entirely. We are fortunate that the pavilion members' equipment is of excellent quality, unlike the previous battles we fought before when there were barely enough spoils of war to go around, even though our losses were not significant back then. At this moment, Aqua Rose was overjoyed. The guilds they had fought in the past were much poorer compared to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. The enemy guilds back then consisted mostly of ordinary players, with only a small number of elite players. The equipment they could drop was naturally of low quality. Bronze and mysterious iron equipment was considered top-tier goods for those guilds. Now, however, the enemies they had killed were the elites and experts of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Naturally, the items they dropped were on an entirely different level in terms of quality. The majority of the equipment worn by the pavilion's elite members was level 20 secret silver equipment, with the weakest being level 20 mysterious iron equipment, and the strongest being level 20 fine gold equipment. As for the members of the War Dragon Legion, all the equipment they wore was level 25, with the majority being level 25 fine gold equipment, and the weakest being level 25 secret silver equipment. A few legionnaires even had level 25 dark gold equipment. Naturally, the items they dropped were astounding. Currently, level 20 bronze equipment was being sold for around 20 silver. Even mysterious iron equipment sold for around 40 silver only. However, The prices for secret silver equipment was a different story altogether. With the difference of just one rank, the price increased from around 40 silver straight up to around 90 silver. If it were secret silver equipment meant for MTS, the price would go further, up to 1 gold 20 silver. This disparity was mainly due to the sheer difficulty in obtaining secret silver equipment. In level 20, 6-man party dungeons, even at hell mode, there was only a fixed chance for secret silver equipment to drop. Only 10-man hell mode team dungeons would drop secret silver equipment with 100% certainty, with a small chance of dropping fine gold equipment. Most players in God's Domain were just beginning to raid level 20, 10-man team dungeons, and the number of teams that could raid hell mode was very low. With the tight supply of level 20 secret silver equipment, it was only natural for prices to be a lot higher. As for level 20 fine gold equipment, its prices were even more inflated. Each piece of such equipment sold for at least 4 gold. Normally, only 20-man hell mode team dungeons would drop fine gold equipment with 100% certainty. Meanwhile, there was only a fixed chance for one to drop in hard mode. Hence, fine gold equipment was much rarer, and its price much higher. If level 20 equipment was already like this, there was no need to mention level 25 equipment. For equipment, although an increase in 1 rank was equivalent to an increase in 5 levels, level 25 secret silver equipment was much more expensive than level 20 fine gold equipment. At present, each piece sold for 5 gold or more. Moreover, the supply of level 25 secret silver equipment on the market was extremely limited. People usually circulated such equipment within their own inner circles, and players would have to rely on their connections to purchase one. As for level 25 fine gold equipment, they were considered the best equipment currently available in God's Domain. Setting aside the fact that nobody would sell such equipment in the first place, if there were some available for sale, the price would be at least 15 gold. Currently, among the 5,000 plus pieces of equipment in Shifeng's hands, there were over 2,000 pieces of level 20 mysterious iron equipment and over 2,000 pieces of level 20 secret silver equipment. As for the remainder, over 600 pieces were level 20 fine gold equipment, over 400 were level 25 secret silver equipment, over 150 were level 25 fine gold equipment, and a total of 12 pieces were level 25 dark gold equipment. If converted to coins, all this equipment would be worth more than 10,000 gold. After fighting a single war, Zero Wing had made a pure profit of over 10,000 gold. Any guild would be celebrating after such a harvest. Not to mention, even if a guild had 10,000 gold, it would not be able to obtain so many pieces of equipment. If a guild wished to develop quickly, other than having experts leading its members, it was also essential to have equipment in the guild's warehouse. The amount of equipment a guild possessed determined the number of members it could sustain. Now that Shifeng had received such a huge influx of equipment, he could definitely advance Zero Wing further, absorbing even more members into the guild. Guild leader, should I place the equipment into the guild's warehouse? Aqua Rose asked. Organize them and place the ones with good attributes into the guild's warehouse. Hand over the remainder to Melancholic for sale, Shifeng instructed after giving her question some thought. A majority of the current players had already reached level 20 or above. Those who hadn't reached level 20 were either new to God's Domain, or just ordinary lifestyle players. Meanwhile, all the elite members in Zero Wing were level 25 or above, whereas ordinary members were either level 23 or level 24. Hence, their demand for level 20 equipment was not particularly high. Level 20 equipment was currently considered mainstream equipment in God's Domain. Its popularity just happened to be at its peak. After more time passed, level 20 equipment would grow obsolete and lose its value. Hence, now was the best time to sell their excess equipment and maximize their profit. Currently, the candlelight trading firm continued to expand every day. However, the variety of goods the firm sold was still insufficient. There was a limit to the number of players the firm could attract just by relying on the intermediate mana armor kits and light stones. Only when the firm could sell good equipment in large quantities would it truly be able to hold its ground in Starmoon Kingdom. In Shifeng's previous life, many trading firms would sell the bronze, mysterious iron, secret silver, fine gold, and even dark gold equipment produced by its forgers. Only by following that example could the candlelight trading firm maintain its shop's competitiveness. Soon after, Shifeng logged out of the game to rest. Time passed slowly. On the day after the Great Battle, the atmosphere surrounding White River City was no longer oppressive like before, and many players on the streets had begun talking about yesterday's war. Damn. I can't believe that, while I was at work during the day, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was actually defeated. I know, right? Zero Wing is OP now. If even a super first-rate guild is helpless against it, it would be even more impossible for other guilds. It is a huge pity that you did not get to watch that battle. That Dragon Phoenix Pavilion really deserves its title as a super first-rate guild. The number of experts they sent over yesterday could easily overwhelm any first-rate guild. However, Zero Wing still came out on top. Nobody could have imagined that they actually had such a powerful NPC guard, that one NPC killed hundreds of top-tier experts all by himself. My eyes nearly fell out when I saw that scene back then. Now that Zero Wing has defeated the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, it will definitely become even more powerful in the future. I heard that Zero Wing has begun mass recruitment again. I failed their test the last time. I wonder if I can pass it this time. Previously, I thought about trying to join a super guild. Now, however, it seems that there won't be a need to do so. I'll go with you to apply for the test. The independent players filling the streets and alleyways of White River City talked fervently about Zero Wing, a fire of anticipation burning in their eyes. These players felt proud just thinking about residing in the same city as Zero Wing, a guild capable of contending against the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Compared to those flamboyant first-rate guilds, Zero Wing was far more powerful. In reality, such a reaction wasn't limited to just the players of White River City. The independent players of many other cities, other kingdoms even, began migrating to White River City one after another, every one of them hoping to join Zero Wing. In just half a day's time, Zero Wing completely recovered to its original strength. The number of elite players Zero Wing had right now was even higher than before the war with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Chapter 560, Times Have Changed. Chapter 560, Times Have Changed. Normally, the guilds involved in a guild war would have to undergo a protracted recovery before they could regain their peak. However, after Zero Wing's miraculous victory over the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, its prestige throughout the entire Star Moon Kingdom soared. At this moment, not even the few first-rate guilds based in Star Moon Kingdom were a match for it. As a result, a large number of independent players swarmed to White River City in order to join Zero Wing. In no time at all, Zero Wing went from being an ordinary guild with 50,000 members to a large guild with over 80,000 members. Moreover, this was after Zero Wing increased the difficulty of its recruitment test. Most importantly, this number was still rising rapidly, with no signs of slowing down at all. Zero Wing's development speed rendered the various large guilds in Star Moon Kingdom speechless. Currently, Zero Wing could already be described using the term overcrowded. All of this was a result of Zero Wing's future becoming limitless. Previously, although Zero Wing had attracted quite a lot of attention due to its various feats, at the end of the day, it was merely another small guild that was a dime a dozen in God's domain. It was an existence that would disappear in an instant should it accidentally anger a large guild. Hence, when independent players were choosing a guild to join, the first ones they would consider were definitely those large guilds instead of Zero Wing. Now, however, the situation had changed. Firstly, Zero Wing was already an existence that did not need to fear any other guild. Secondly, the treatment and benefits Zero Wing provided surpassed even those of first-rate guilds. Thirdly, there were all sorts of top-tier equipment available in the guild's warehouse. Just looking at the wide array of equipment would make one drool. Not to mention, the guild residents also had a large number of private rooms available for rent. Whether it was in terms of leveling speed or equipment upgrading speed, Zero Wing was much faster than every other guild. With so many advantages, everyone would naturally hope to join Zero Wing. Aren't you guys being too arrogant? You defeated the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's raid only once. Among the large number of independent teams out there, the combat power of our Flying Eagles team is definitely ranked above average. We will be highly valued even if we join a first-rate guild. Yet, now that we are trying to join Zero Wing, only 2 of the 10 of us managed to pass your tests. Aren't you looking down on us a little too much? A level 24 Guardian Knight demanded angrily. That's right. We hurried over to this place from far away and have spent a lot of money on teleportation fees, all because we want to join Zero Wing. Can't you lower the difficulty of the test by just a little bit? A level 23 ranger complained. At the recruitment hall inside Zero Wing's residence, many players were voicing their discontent over Zero Wing's recruitment test. This situation was giving Aqua Rose a huge headache as well. She could not understand why Shifeng suddenly decided to raise the requirements despite these already being very high before, even higher than those of first-rate guilds. Yet, now, Shifeng raised that bar even further. He was practically trying to drive players away from the guild. Guild leader, there are countless guilds in God's domain, and all of them are frantically trying to recruit members. Now that we have defeated the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, we have the perfect opportunity to develop quickly. If we don't take this chance to recruit a large number of players while we are still popular, it won't be as easy to do so in the future. Can't you lower the conditions a little? Aqua Rose asked. Most of the players who had come from other cities were relatively skilled players back in their own cities. However, in order to better develop themselves, they had come all the way to White River City specifically to join Zero Wing. One could say that these players were the cream of the crop of other cities, and rejecting them right now would be such a pity. I won't change this condition no matter what. Besides, I didn't invite them over, they came of their own free will. In any case, the condition is there. Once they pass it, they can naturally join the guild. If they fail, there is nothing we can do about it. Zero Wing's resources are limited. Our guild isn't a garbage collection station. Moreover, Zero Wing is taking the path of the elite. There is no meaning in recruiting in bulk. Shifeng showed no signs of regret at all. Slowly, he explained, you have seen it for yourself. During the war with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, the War Dragon Legion nearly annihilated all our elites. If we did not have a large number of NPC guards to assist us, the War Dragon Legion might have wiped us out. Hence, what we need to do now is not to increase the number of members we have but to improve the quality of our members. Aqua Rose fell silent upon hearing Shifeng's words. The gap between the two sides in that war was simply too vast. Not to mention the War Dragon Legion, even the standard of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's elite members was significantly higher than Zero Wing's. Had the gap been smaller, Zero Wing would not have suffered such massive losses. Indeed, my mind must have been clouded before. I'll carry out your orders immediately, then. After Shifeng's lecture, Aqua Rose finally realized that she'd had her head in the clouds out of joy from their victory. Zero Wing had always been taking the path of the elite. It was precisely because of this that the guild's members managed to improve their strength so quickly. Despite having only 50,000 members, there were over 13,000 elite members in the guild. This was a very frightening ratio. Moreover, Zero Wing's success in developing from a small guild with only several thousand members to a guild with more elite members than even a second-rate guild was all because every guild member received a significant share of the guild's resources. Following which, Shifeng handed over all Zero Wing-related matters to Aqua Rose while he went to his forging room in the Candlelight trading firm. The demand for intermediate mana armor kits was just too high. The kits he had made several days ago were nearly sold out now, so he had to replenish the inventory immediately. During this period of time, Shifeng had been constantly busy developing the Candlelight trading firm, so he did not have time to do anything else. Notably, the time limit for his epic quest, Darkness Descends, was nearly up. Fortunately, the Candlelight trading firm was already well developed, and its fame had already spread throughout the entire kingdom. It would not take long to accumulate 30,000 gold. While a sea of players was applying to join Zero Wing, the situation on the Candlelight trading firm's side was also getting out of hand. Currently, White River City was flourishing. It was no longer inferior to Star Moon City. Moreover, during this period of time, The candlelight trading firm had begun selling equipment in large quantities, enjoying great popularity from the public. As for the overwhelming trading firm, it had already been left in the dust by now. Inside the lively candlelight trading firm, the various large guilds that had originally been planning to take advantage of Zero Wing's misfortune had all gathered here once again. This time, however, no one displayed the arrogance they had before, and they were all following the rules of the trading firm to the letter. Guild leader, do you really think Black Flame will be willing to meet us this time? Purple Eye asked as she looked at Galaxy Past. Since he has opened a trading firm, he will naturally want to do business. However, I am also not sure of Black Flame's personality. Previously, he challenged the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion without hesitation. This time, he might really ignore us outright. Galaxy Past laughed bitterly. If I had known things would end up like this, I would have followed in Gentle Snow's footsteps before. I heard that Gentle Snow managed to purchase quite a number of intermediate mana armor kits, and they have long since made preparations to raid 50-man large-scale team dungeons. Not only had the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion suffered a crushing defeat, but Nine Dragons Emperor was also forced to bring the War Dragon Legion back to the pavilion's main headquarters to recuperate. If even the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion ended up in such a state, ordinary first-rate guilds like them stood no chance against Zero Wing at all. Now, the only thing they could do was wait. Shortly after Shifeng began forging intermediate mana armor kits, Melancholic Smile entered his forging room. Guild leader, many upper managers from first-rate guilds have come to the candlelight trading firm. This time, they wish to meet and have a proper discussion with you. When you will have the time to do so? Melancholic Smile asked softly. They're finally here. Shifeng stopped what he was doing. Revealing a faint smile, he said, let's head over there and take a look, then. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,